Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 2. People generally come to the belief that their Anbu are perfect. They could execute perfect commands, unleash jutsu with perfect, deadly accuracy, and they could even kill perfectly. They were, in every sense, the perfect shinobi. Most tended to stop believing the reality that Anbu were human and that they made mistakes. Everyone held the Anbu in such a high position of authority and respect, but few ever realized what that authority and respect entailed. So much darkness, evil, hatred, and loneliness accompanied the job. Strong shinobi, worthy citizens of their village, were pushed so far to the edge of their lives and their minds. Many haunted by the memories of the slaughters that they had done and would even continue to do. Why was it that the Anbu had no rest? It was because that was their penance, their punishment for the lives that they took. The damage to their psyche was their cost for the power, authority, and respect that they received. However, many questioned if it was ever worth it. Tsubaki's steps trudged through the village in the dead of night. Her feet echoed across the dirt almost heavily and disdainfully. Tsubaki always figured that her life was merely based on two things: orders and the completion of those orders. For her, nothing else truly mattered in her life. Those who didn't follow orders were merely pathetic children too scared to get their hands dirty. Tsubaki never felt that way. Even now her hands were stained with the blood of countless people that she had slaughtered on the orders of her Hokage. Traitors, former allies, and even people that she had never known personally. For Tsubaki, work was everything; anything other than that was irrelevant and inconsequential. Tsubaki cared for nothing that was not a job. Maybe that's why Mizuki broke up with her. He told her that she always took her damn job too seriously. Tsubaki couldn't agree more. And yet, how far had she truly fallen? How had Tsubaki, one of the Anbu's most ironclad members, allowed this to happen? She wasn't sure. Moon, moon, in the sky, we have your fear of things that fly. Take the blood and drink, but be careful, too much and you will sink. Hehehehe. Tsubaki's frown somewhat deepened before her grip found more strength than before and swiftly tightened its hold over what she was holding. The noise of droplets assaulted her ears, taunting her, tormenting her, reminding Tsubaki of her mistake as well as her stupidity. Whatever work or progress there was now destroyed. All in a single day. However, Tsubaki was sure that whatever progress this was that she was thinking of, then it wasn't all that much. The droplets stained the ground behind her like a trail. It was the long thread that connected to her life and her mistake. Dango, Danzo, Danganzo, play with me more. Anbu Nichans, play with me more. Nay, Anbu Nichan, more Anbu Chans are coming to play right. Naruto had fun. That he did Dadbao. Tsubaki forced her legs to keep on moving, not having them the pleasure of stopping. She couldn't until she got him home. However, Tsubaki took her eyes off the street and looked down at Naruto in her arms. Everywhere his body was stained by blood. His shirt had tiny burn marks stretched across it in combination with the dripped spots of blood. The blood ran from his forehead down across his eyes, his cheeks, and his mouth, which he used to lap at an occasion. Underneath the layer of his nails was blood, on his pants there was blood. Nowhere on his young, insane body was there no a place of blood. Even his hair was sprayed with blood. His body reeked of the scent. No doubt the Ninken of the Inuzuka compound would have alerted the entire compound if given enough time. Shish Naruto-kun. No more Anbu for today. We are going home, Tsubaki said with a certain amount of weight and steel in her voice. Naruto merely smiled widely, but he didn't respond as Tsubaki dragged him away through the streets of Konoha. She couldn't rush this time. Naruto was too excited still. His eyes stood high and dilated. His fingers twitched at various intervals. He was too dangerous right now, and Tsubaki couldn't perform the paralysis technique over him again since she knew that he would react violently to her when he woke up, having felt the stimuli of pain in association to her and to his unconsciousness. Tsubaki couldn't have that. It took no more than another 10 minutes for Tsubaki to reach the apartment complex and open the main entrance door. The landlord. Anbu looked up from his desk and frowned. You're late, he called before he noticed Tsubaki stare murderously at him. Her eyes told the Anbu all that he needed to know. Her posture was set to kill, her eyes firm, and yet, the look of emotion on her face was nigh undetectable except for the look of those eyes. The Anbu's frown deepened as Tsubaki made her way over to him. You knew this would happen, didn't you? Tsubaki asked steely. The Anbu narrowed his eyes. Clarify, Tsubaki, he promptly replied with his arms folded. If Tsubaki wasn't Tsubaki, then she surely would have scoffed, but she had better professionalism than that, but professionalism meant virtually nothing here. I'm clarifying about this, Tsubaki said, revealing Naruto's bloodied form, the Anbu landlord. However, as Tsubaki had expected, he didn't look none the more concerned nor none the more worried. His eyes roamed Naruto's form for a little longer. He took into account the wideness of Naruto's eyes and the high trembling of his body. The Anbu then looked up at Tsubaki. What about it? He asked. Tsubaki slowly blinked and hid her utter surprise of her comrades. We just had one of Hokage-sama's council, the most dangerous person on his council, actually put him in training room with the foundation, and you dare answer me with a question. Look at him right now. How is this supposed to protect Konoha? Tsubaki asked, pointing towards Naruto's form, his shivering, gleeful form. The Anbu closed his eyes for a second before opening them back up. I am unsure of how Uzumaki-san will protect Konoha, but he cannot be awarded the safety of an innocent childhood. Things are expected of him and it is his duty to perform those things as Konoha's guardian, the Anbu replied. Tsubaki looked down as Naruto seemed to be interested in the both of them. His smile widened to the extent where Tsubaki could see his white teeth. How had only those been blood-free? Tsubaki didn't take the time to contemplate before looking forward. You would expect us to put our trust and faith in a broken child. A broken child that this village has caused. This is the most foolish, asinine, pathetic thing I have ever heard of. If you would like to know, he slaughtered them all. Look at his body. Despite the burns and scorch marks on his body, there is not a single wound on his body. All the blood that you see before you is the blood of those he murdered. He didn't throw a single kunai nor a single shuriken, he was surrounded by nearly Chunin-level candidates and came out of it all without a single scratch. What does that tell you? Tsubaki asked warningly. The landlord merely closed his eyes and went back to his desk without a single word before sitting down. Anbu Kazuna was always about the mission, she didn't care how dirty she got her hands to get the job done. Kazuna was always about completing her duties towards the Hokage and towards the village. Konoha is counting on you, Tsubaki. We are counting on you to be the handler of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Keep him calm when he needs to be calm and unstable when he needs to be unstable. Nothing more, nothing less. This is your duty, Tsubaki, and you will not go back on it. Understood? The Anbu asked coldly. Tsubaki stared at him for a moment. That's right. It was merely the mission. All Tsubaki had to care about was the mission. If the mission failed, then chaos ensued. Tsubaki wasn't a saint and she would never try to be. This wasn't her place. She was merely the Hokage's tool, to be used as he saw fit. That's what all shinobi were. The ones who thought different were just the pathetic idealists hoping not to face the cold reality of the world. None, Tsubaki responded. Her eyes lost their heat before she turned around and walked up the stairs with Naruto in her arms without another word. The landlord watched her leave, but his eyes fell onto Naruto. The blonde was smiling, but the landlord let a shiver run down his spine at the sadistic, murderous, violent, agonizing, painful, all-around inhuman glare in Naruto's eyes. The blonde seemed to lock on his form like a hawk to a drifting snake. The landlord glared at the blonde. Their eyes met and quickly the landlord wished that they hadn't as he watched Naruto open his mouth. His tongue rolled out of the side and licked the upper portion of his lips before moving down to the bottom portion, making sure to flick across his rather large canine-sized parts of his teeth. Gone were his blue eyes and in place were thick, red-slitted ones. The Anbu frowned, but beyond his knowledge Kushina had been looking at him. Slowly, but surely had she been coming down from her high of spending quality time with her son and their play with all the other shinobi enough to look at the landlord. He knew that they were hurting her son and he didn't care. Kushina grinned and outwardly, Naruto's grin followed as well. Dear harmful spy, the world looks left, the world looks right. I will break your wings before you can fly. Kushina spoke with a wide smile, however there was no warmth to be found in her eyes. Tsubaki led Naruto into the bathroom of his room. Quickly stripping him of his clothes and placing him in the hot water of the tub, she watched as the blood slowly began to make itself disappear from his body and his hair, like it had almost never been there. However, Tsubaki always understood. For even the most expert shinobi, once you've killed, no matter how many times you try to wash it off, the blood never comes off your hands. Still, Tsubaki wondered if that was the case with Naruto. Looking at him, she saw no hints of remorse in his eyes, no hints of depression or sympathy. Even with his insane smile, she saw no happiness in his eyes. The only ever time his eyes seemed to light up was when he spoke of his Ka-chan. Taking a washcloth, Tsubaki began to work of cleaning over Naruto's body. "Nay, handler Onichan," Naruto called. Tsubaki just got to Naruto's legs before she looked up to see Naruto looking at her. His eyes focused upon her features. She tried to put up her best fake smile if it was even worth anything, but she doubted that he bought it. "Why do I fight with Anbu Nichans and Nei-chans, but I don't fight with the other kids?" Naruto asked. Tsubaki allowed a small sigh to escape her lips before offering her best answer. "Because you are a very unique boy, Naruto-kun. The others wouldn't be fun with you at all," Tsubaki replied. She watched Naruto's expression turn sour but for a moment before it quickly righted itself and the smile came back creepily, filling Tsubaki with unprecedented amounts of worry, but she just as quickly shook it off. "I did a good job, right, handler Onichan?" Naruto asked. Tsubaki widened her eyes. Curse this indecisiveness. This was merely an assignment. This was going to end eventually. She would not grow attached to the mission. Complications arose when one got attached to the mission. Case in point, Tsukumo Hatake, for failing to complete the mission, in return saving his comrades, he was ostracized until he committed suicide. Tsubaki didn't think bad of him, but she truly thought he was a fool. Nothing came before the mission and nothing came after. So, why did it hurt? Why did it make her clench her teeth and ball her fists every damn time, she looked in Naruto's eyes? "Yes, Naruto-kun, you did a good job," Tsubaki hesitantly congratulated. She didn't receive a response and Tsubaki was hoping that she wouldn't get one in all honesty. Finally finished, Tsubaki wrapped up the long day with fixing Naruto's dinner. No conversation was made between handler and handlee. Tsubaki was treated to the laughter from Naruto every once in a while based off some joke that he claimed his Ka-chan told him, but Tsubaki altogether ignored it. Soon the dinner was finished as well. Tsubaki diligently washed the dishes while Naruto watched the TV screen. Tsubaki frowned. It was indeed her duty to protect Konoha. She realized this. She never had a doubt that it was, but how was she supposed to put her trust into a child? Yes, what he had done was impressive, but for Tsubaki it was also scary. Some of those Foundation members actually begged for their lives before Naruto wrapped them in chains and proceeded to scorch them all with fire, drown them with water, electrocute them with lightning, bury them 10 feet under with earth, or cut them to pieces with wind. Tsubaki could only admit that she had never seen such glee and heartless brutality within an individual, but for every kill, Tsubaki only watched as Naruto's eyes grew wider and wider until Tsubaki quickly blinked herself awake. She was still washing the dishes, or rather she was supposed to. She had stopped long ago. By now the water was most likely seeping into her fingers, wrinkling them. Tsubaki turned to face Naruto and she noticed that his curious eyes seemed targeted towards her. "Something wrong, Naruto-kun?" Tsubaki asked. Naruto looked at her for a second before she watched him turn back towards the TV screen. Tsubaki didn't have the time to think about his reaction as she settled for finishing the dishes. Exactly 2 hours of free time for Naruto and Tsubaki passed by before Tsubaki switched off the TV. "Time for your medication, Naruto-kun," Tsubaki replied. Naruto swiftly nodded and Tsubaki watched him swallow the pill down his throat before nodding in agreement as well. "Well then, time for bed, Naruto-kun. I will come get you in the morning," Tsubaki said. Naruto continued not to say a word, just smiling complacently. For Tsubaki it was actually a little unnerving. Pushing Naruto into his room, and outfitting his clothes, Tsubaki placed him in bed. As Tsubaki turned out the light, Naruto opened his eyes. "Sochi, would you be a dear and let me out?" Kushina asked. Naruto's smile cracked across his face almost painfully as he stared at the ceiling in the dark. "I love you, Ka-chan," Naruto called, slowly raising his hand sign into the air. A large puff of smoke came before a body flopped on his 10-year-old body. Naruto looked up and noticed a pair of violet eyes looking down at him lovingly. Ka-chan loves you too, baby. Never forget that, Kushina said before planting a kiss to her son's forehead. Naruto grinned widely while Kushina stuck out her tongue playfully. Naruto snickered before Kushina hopped to her feet gracefully. Naruto flung the covers off his body. Kushina proceeded to the window and opened it. In a flash before Naruto's eyes, she was gone with the wind, leaving Naruto to merely take in the scenery of the village. So many potential playmates. So much potential jam-filled dango. So much potential flies caught within the spider's web. Naruto's fingers itched in eagerness. Today had been the most exhilarating day of his life, and hopefully tomorrow would be even better. It had better be, or Naruto would not be entertained. Uzumaki Naruto craved entertainment. Apartment entrance. The Anbu landlord gave a small yawn as he flipped through the pages of a book he was reading. That's what it looked like on the surface. Underneath it all, he was actually pinging his chakra at various intervals in search of anyone attempting to come within range of the apartment complex. The sounds of a storm started to brew outside. He could hear the heavy rain fall down across the window as he continued his duties. As a sound of reverberating thunder crashed across the sky, the dim light that was lit for his reading convenience flickered slightly. The Anbu paid it no mind. It will be time to change the shift soon, he thought to himself. He really wouldn't mind it at all, actually. He had been tired ever since Tsubaki came through the door with their mission in her arms. Though the landlord didn't show it, he had been surprised by Tsubaki's news of the blonde's exploits. Not a single scratch was on his person, just the blood of his opponents. It really was a marvel, but not always an unheard of one. There had been records of Genin, Chunin, and even Jonin going into battle without catching so much as a scratch and killing opponents that far exceeded them, but those records were so small that they could be counted on a person's 10 fingers. He hadn't let Tsubaki in on it, but the landlord wondered if this was indeed right as well. He couldn't just blindly accept this person to help a mentally unstable young boy to become the protector of Konoha. He would never take a given situation seriously enough to do so. How was Konoha supposed to rely on someone like that? But it wasn't his place to question the orders of his Hokage either, so he just did as he was told. However, he couldn't believe it. How had things gone so wrong? How had the Yondaime's legacy gotten so damaged? He didn't understand. Even with the report given of the incident, he still didn't understand. He couldn't forget the look in Naruto's eyes just before Tsubaki took him up the stairs. It was a look that told him that he knew what they were talking about, and he was pleasurably pleased. The landlord blinked himself out of his stupor as the rolling sounds of thunder and rain assaulted his eardrums. Each drip of rain masking whatever other sounds there were outside had been lost on him. He pinged his chakra once more and felt nothing for the 20th time tonight. Truly, this was getting stressful. However, suddenly, a louder than normal crash of thunder came from outside, effectively knocking out the lights. That was strange. The circuit breaker shouldn't have been so affected by the lightning if they had installed it correctly. The Anbu frowned before a sigh escaped his lips. I really don't have time for this, the Anbu said to himself as he stood to his feet. He pushed his chair back into the desk before he took a right down the hall. The landlord never noticed a pair of violet-colored eyes watching his every move. In time, a small smile painfully creaked itself into existence in the shadows. Walking down into the basement, the landlord opened the circuit breaker box. Taking a flashlight and turning it on, he peered inside. It was then that he knew something was wrong. The switch for the lights to the building had been turned off, manually. The lightning hadn't knocked out the power like he had thought. If the lightning hadn't done it, then what did? The landlord tensed, quickly lowering his chakra down into almost nothingness. He tried to find any presence around the apartment complex, but he got nothing but darkness. Naruto was up in his room, yet for some strange reason he was wide awake and looking in this direction. He wasn't looking at the floor or anything. Well, yes, he was technically, but his eyes seemed to be more focused upon the Anbu himself. The Anbu shivered when he saw Naruto wave to him with a wide grin on his face. His lips moved. The Anbu read them perfectly. Good, bye, and bu. Ni, Chan, the landlord pronounced before he heard dark, twisted, broken laughter. The laughter of a female woman that he didn't recognize. Quickly the Anbu frowned, taking his best stance. Rain, rain, go away, come again another day. Boom, 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 the thunder crashes down. There is an Anbu that looks like a clown. One to the left, one to the right, squeeze his neck and snap it tight. Ka-chan loves her sweetie Databane. Ka-chan will protect Sochi from everyone Databane. The Anbu frowned before he fell to his knees from unknown pressure. The room had been flooded in an overbearing key of anger, murder, and depression. Halt. The Anbu ordered as best he could. He gasped in surprise. This was the woman, he was sure of it. This was the woman that the Hokage had told everyone all of the Anbu to be on the lookout for across the village. Tsubaki had warned that she had nearly been killed by someone called Ka-chan. The Anbu had no doubt that this was that person. His voice had been shaky. No words were spoken. The woman fell silent. The only sound were her soft steps across the floor. Seeing his chance, the landlord got to his feet in one swift motion and charged at the woman, his sword at the ready. He appeared upon her within an instant before swinging the sword downward. A clash of metal assaulted his ears. He noticed that his sword was trapped within a tight grip by a white chain. Raising an eyebrow, the Anbu jumped back and sought to reevaluate his strategy. However, Kushina didn't give him the time as the Anbu heard the sickening cracks of her neck muscles as Kushina tilted her head to the side in confusion. Would you like to play with me, Anbu-san? The redhead asked. Before the landlord could even respond, a chain wrapped itself around his neck. The Anbu choked on the metal before the chain slowly began to raise him into the air. The Anbu winced as Kushina held her hand higher and higher, the chain complying with her wishes as it took its captive nearly towards the ceiling. You won't get away with this. The landlord growled out. Protect my baby. Ka-chan will protect her baby, Kushina explained. She looked up at the male and watched him squirm for breath, his feet suddenly sporadic as they kicked at their open air while his hands words furiously trying to rid himself of the chain slowly constricting around his neck. Despite his predicament and his pain, he heard the sounds of humming coming from Kushina. It was almost like a light-hearted song slowly being twisted and shaped into a deadly swirl of anger, and madness, and insanity. With a squinted eye, the Anbu watched as Kushina summoned 3 more chains, however at the end of these 3 chains were sharp, razor-like edges just made for piercing. The storm outside flashed illuminating the room as well as the landlord's captor. He gasped as he knew her instantly. He immediately stared into the eyes. The broken, dark, angry, distorted, disturbed, depraved, insane eyes of the Yondaime Hokage's wife, and they looked just like the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's eyes. Kushina's smile widened. I love him. He loves me. Sochi is the only one I see. Anbu-chan here is full of spite, but he will be the one to die tonight. Ha 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 ha. Kushina laughed as she hunched over, her beautiful red hair sprawled over her face and to the ground mimicking a large trail of blood that the Anbu felt like he had seen so many times in his life from his dying opponents. The laughter was sickening as well as maddening. Never had the Anbu expected one of the Anbu headquarters' most famous operatives to be so destroyed. The Anbu would cover his ears if he held the power. Even now he could feel his chakra being sapped away like a straw sucking through a cup. Shina, Ma, stop this please. Think of your late husband. The Anbu urged. Slowly all forms of laughter stopped. The Anbu watched as the amusement in Kushina's features quickly dissipated only to be returned with insane rage and maddening anger. He was wrong. I was wrong. We were wrong. Trust, gone. Sochi, hurt. Nothing before my Sochi matters Databane. Everyone hurts him. Ka-chan will not let anyone hurt him anymore. The Anbu gasped as Kushina's hands clenched at her head painfully. The Anbu frowned. Naruto Uzumaki is the protector of the village. We need him. The Anbu called out to her. He noticed the grip-on chain around his neck tighten making his body clench. It's all right Sochi. Mama will protect you. Always Ka-chan will protect you. Mina-kun, stay in Shinigami-chan's stomach forever. Ka-chan will be with Sochi Databane. Ka-chan will be with Sochi. Kushina suddenly shouted as the chains surrounding her form blew forward. The life in the landlord Anbu's eyes faded as 5 sharp chains stabbed themselves through his chest and out his back. His blood dripped to the chains while the lightning flashed through the sky. Kushina smiled. Naruto chuckled in his bed with he rocked his body back and forth. His eyes were wide at the wall. He had heard everything through his connection to his mother. He heard the Anbu speak as well as his mother's proclamation which only served to steel his resolve. No one will hurt Ka-chan Dadbao, Naruto replied to himself. His fingers twitched and flexed irregularly. Meanwhile, Kushina's chains dispelled as the Anbu's body dropped to the ground. The rest of his blood spilled upon the ground of the basement as Kushina snickered. Spinning on her heel, the habanero Uzumaki disappeared up with a hand sign and swiftly appeared at her son's side. Sensually, Kushina slipped her arms around her son's form and pulled him into her embrace. For but a second the eyes of the broken were gone and replaced with utter warmth, but it was all too fast and missed as the insanity took over once again. Kushina vanished out of sight. But Naruto wants to play doctor. Let him play doctor. You're not the proctor, you're the cadaver. Naruto said with a demented and psychotic grin as his blue eyes flashed to red in a brief instant. Such sweet, delicious jam tonight. Next morning, Tsubaki and 6 other Anbu stood before the Hokage. The Anbu formerly known as Kazuna had subbed herself out with a clone to attend to Naruto while she attended the investigation. How did this happen? Hiruzen asked, holding up a file in front of everyone. On the file were the words, deceased, as everyone looked at what remained of the Anbu landlord. His name had been Hatao Jin. None of the Anbu uttered a word for a moment, but Hiruzen was in a bad mood today and he didn't have time for softness or steadiness. Explain to me what happened. Sarutobi ordered and the Anbu straightened up almost instantly. Tsubaki included. We are unsure, Hokage-sama. All we know is that Jin-san most likely went into the basement to check the circuit breaker since it was open. We theorize that he went down there because of the storm, but as to why he was found the way that he was, we do not know, the head Anbu of the operation responded. Hiruzen intertwined his hands and sighed grimly. How had this happened? Just how had this come to pass? Hiruzen knew that his age had to be catching up with him now. He looked just so tired. Glancing upwards he looked at Tsubaki, whose face gave very little away. How is Naruto-kun? Sarutobi asked. Tsubaki took a deep breath before speaking. All seems to be fine with him, Hokage-sama. He doesn't seem out of the ordinary, well, ordinary for a mentally unstable person. I just gave him his medication so he's in school right now. However, Hokage-sama, I do not believe that having Danzo-sama as Naruto's teacher will benefit. I gave you the results of that session. I do not believe we can afford that again, Tsubaki replied. Sarutobi happily agreed in the form of a nod. He had truly believed that as well. Danzo had just been a theory that Sarutobi had hoped would work. Well, obviously it didn't. What if it was this Ka-chan person? Another Anbu, a female just like Kazuna, asked. Everyone quickly tensed up being reminded of that. Tsubaki clenched her hands in frustration. It wasn't outside the realm of possibility. After all, even Tsubaki had been snuck up upon by the woman. It wasn't so far-fetched to think that she couldn't have snuck up on Hatao, but the only reason was why. What motive would she have had in killing the landlord of the building? It just didn't make any sense. Ka-chan will protect her baby. Those words echoed through the recesses of Tsubaki's mind. Perhaps this woman was a distressed mother. A former high-ranked kunoichi, and she saw it as her duty to protect children who were oppressed or, being oppressed, something like that. This woman had to have had a psychiatric disorder or a high level of stress deficiency. It seemed like she was tailor-made to the things surrounding Uzumaki Naruto, but how far did that her fangs sink into the things surrounding that life? Tsubaki wasn't sure, and she knew that she wasn't going to be getting much sleep until she figured it out. Something on your mind, Tsubaki? Tsubaki stared forward to see her former fellow Anbu and Hokage looking at her with surprising interest. Seeing that the proverbial kunai was in her hand at the moment, Tsubaki decided to strike. The only thing that I do understand is that Naruto knows this person, or at least has some knowledge of their existence. He's brought up Ka-chan several times in this week alone. I sees it as his goal and pleasure to make sure that she isn't hurt as well. They seem to feed off of each other's goals. Maybe she provides him with safety, and he provides her with the assurance of a happy son being taken care of by a loving mother. This is only my guess, Tsubaki contemplated. She watched as the other Anbu fell silent, one even placing a finger to their chin in thought. It would make sense. The adoption rate back during the Kyuubi incident had nearly tripled since parents lost their children and sought to have another in their lives. The orphanage had never seen such a good day, a male Anbu reported next. Tsubaki swiftly nodded. Conversation flew back and forth, but Tsubaki managed to stay with it all. In truth, Tsubaki hadn't known about all of the technical stuff during the Kyubi incident. Konoha was merely on a shortage of money and supplies. She had too many missions to take to be concerned with everyone else. The village was the only thing that mattered. Perhaps the best course of action would be to change the location. The female mask-covered Anbu asked. No. Everyone jumped as they turned to Tsubaki in relative surprise of her stern outburst. It wasn't uncommon, but for the normally cold and antisocial Anbu, it was still a shock nonetheless. That's not going to work. Whoever we're investigating, they will understand what is going on here. It's obvious she has more information on Konoha as a whole than we do on her. Remember that, like the Kyubi Jinchuriki, she is unstable and we don't know what she's going to do if she finds out that Naruto's not at the same spot that he was when she left him. We have to tread carefully, Tsubaki emphasized. Everyone quickly began to see the grimness of the situation. However, no one needed to think about it much anymore as Hiruzen stood to his feet. Tsubaki, continue to monitor Naruto-kun. You are his handler as well as his protector. I am counting on you for this mission. We will keep Naruto-kun where he is for the time being, but I want regular patrols throughout the village from now on. Something is going on here and I pray that this will pass soon enough, Sarutobi explained. The Anbu in the room quickly nodded. Tsubaki was ready to leave as well, but a hand from the Hokage stopped her. Tsubaki stayed where she was. She expected the elderly man to speak immediately, but he only resumed signing documents. Tsubaki's ears took into account the constant ticking of the clock's hands behind her. Tsubaki didn't know how much time had passed, but it seemed that enough of it did to annoy her greatly. She was more than ready to speak about the current predicament, but the sounds of the doorknob opening had stopped her entirely. With the presence behind the door, Tsubaki frowned. This was not what she needed right now. Tsubaki watched the door open to reveal Shimura Danzo. Neither said anything to each other. After all, no words needed to be spoken about what happened yesterday. Both were there, so it wasn't worth making some pathetic accusation against the other. Bickering was saved for personal affairs and was not to be presented before the Hokage. You're a little late, Sarutobi proclaimed. There were important matters that I could not leave attended. I'm a very busy person, Hiruzen, Danzo remarked. Tsubaki raised an eyebrow, but decided not to comment. If the Hokage didn't have a problem with the way of talk from Danzo, then it was of no purpose to her. Well then, I'll make this brief then. Danzo, you sent me the report of Naruto-kun from yesterday. Danzo, I fear that your method may have damaged Naruto-kun even more than before, Sarutobi quickly spoke. Tsubaki sent a tiny glare towards the council member. Danzo's stance was relaxed, calm, focused. He hadn't been riled up at all, but she would have been surprised if he were. The Kyubi Jinchuriki is not a child to be coddled. It is far too late for that. The best course of action is to keep pushing him to his madness. It is grim and unfortunate that he will not survive into his later years from the stress, but it is for the benefit of Konoha that he sacrifice himself. Even now the numbers were computed were astronomical. He faced off and slaughter a good number of my agents without receiving a scratch. The mark of a true shinobi, Hiruzen. This is also without the Kyubi's interference. Yes, the reason he is this way is no doubt Konoha's fault. I am sure that our village, on record, is the first to ever successfully break its Jinchuriki of its sanity. How the seal is even still in place I am unsure, but one of my shinobi put his data into the computer. His data is rather interesting. I'll run it by you later, Danzo proclaimed. Hiruzen nodded grimly. Minato, Kushina, please forgive him for this turn of events. Sarutobi didn't want this, but now that it was here there was literally nothing he could do about it. I would recommend Uzumaki Naruto to the torture and interrogation department, but the boy is far too much unstable for that type of delicate work. I also fear that even if we try to bring him back or restructure his sanity, then it will mean the death of the person doing it, who will have to witness everything that went on with him. I am sure not even Inoichi Yamanaka would be able to complete the task, Danzo answered once more. It would seem that the best place to put the Kyubi Jinchuriki would have to be the front lines or the higher than normal mission for Genin students. However, the problem would be team placement. No Jonin is going to take the Kyubi Jinchuriki, especially not with the state he's in. Plus, having me be some sort of ko-sensei to the team would imbalance it. If you are willing Hokage-sama then as his handler then I should be the only one on his team as well, Tsubaki replied in relative monotone. Sarutobi and Danzo looked at her for a second before the Sandaime leaned forward. Tsubaki, here is what I want you to do. This will require some time, but if this works out then it will be to Konoha's benefit. If it does not then, I fear the worst, Hiruzen spoke. Tsubaki slowly nodded while Danzo's small frown turned upwards when Sarutobi told the two all of the details. As he told them this, Tsubaki's hands clenched harder and harder, but she never uttered a single word of complaint. In time, Danzo left the room. Tsubaki still stood there. Kazuna, do you believe what I am doing here is right? Tsubaki held up her head in surprise only to see the Hokage's back to her. He was looking out the window and at the village. No doubt his face was etched with depression, uncertainty, fear, and anguish. Tsubaki opened her mouth and spoke her words. It is the mission Hokage-sama. I will do what you ask, Tsubaki said before fading out of the room. It was quiet for a time. However, small droplets appeared on the floor next to the Sandaime's feet. A number of weeks passed since the murder of Hayato Jin, the apartment's landlord. The Anbu that resided in the building worked twice as hard to cover the ground and not have a repeat performance of that time. Along with this came a regular scheduled patrol of Chunin and even Jonin shinobi in the hopes of catching the murderer of the Anbu, but for all those weeks nothing had been found. No anomalies had been reported, everything had just been peaceful. For civilians and even some genin there was not a care in the world sans the missions in the outside world. However, for those Chunin and above, there was a feel of anxiety knowing that there was a killer within Konoha's walls. Everyone knew one thing also. This all gravitated towards the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Speaking of Naruto, the blonde was his normal self, well his version of normal anyway. Tsubaki had continued, to the best of her ability, to handle Naruto and his urges. It was rather odd. Some days he was so playful and yet there were others where just his look alone spelled the massacre of probably the entire village if he were allowed to do so. On and on he spoke of his Ka-chan, which only served to create more anxiety within the Anbu surrounding the building who were just wondering if the blonde was in communication with this woman, but they had no evidence. How could they trust the word of the insane? Nonetheless, Naruto had kept to his word, most of the time, and stayed out of trouble. Naruto never interacted with the kids in the academy nor did he take their ninjutsu, genjutsu, or taijutsu courses. No, he merely kept going to Shimura Danzo, over and over again, each passing day. For his hard work, the blonde was rewarded with his stipulation, ramen. Sure, he was thrown curves such vegetables and a salad on the spare occasion, but Naruto was entertained and for the Anbu that was all they needed for the day to go by without worrying if Naruto would kill anyone. He had been treated as something valuable to Tsubaki and the Anbu. There hadn't been a single attempt on his life since he was taken from the ward. And yet, within those weeks, Tsubaki couldn't stop her foreboding feeling. Something was wrong. Something was deathly wrong. Tsubaki dressed Naruto after his bath, she then fixed his breakfast then proceeded to help him eat. Naruto-kun, we're not going to the academy today, Tsubaki spoke as she brushed Naruto's hair. She looked over the blonde's shoulder for his reaction. His eyes opened in a strained manner and the heavy psychotic grin on his face worried her. With a quick ping of her chakra, Tsubaki scanned the interior and exterior of the house. She felt nothing abnormal. Maybe this is just the Kyuubi Jinchuriki being himself. Tsubaki figured before shaking her head. She finished brushing the blonde's hair. No more Anbu Nichans. No more Anbu Nichans. Naruto asked staring forward rather innocently. Tsubaki stopped brushing his hair for just a moment before continuing. No more today Naruto-kun. No Naruto-kun, you are going to be coming with me to the Hokage mansion. We're going to see Hokage-sama, Tsubaki replied. Naruto didn't offer any visible reaction that he had heard her words. Kushina, however, was a different story. The redhead Uzumaki female currently stared at her reflection in the water. Kushina stuck her tongue out at herself in amusement as she watched her reflection return the sentiment. You might look like me, but Sochi only has one Ka-chan databane. Kushina spoke. In the reflective pools of water, her eyes turned red for just a second. Kushina slowly licked her lips. Sochi needs only one Ka-chan. Kushina exclaimed. The amusement slowly left her face before she raised her fists into the air. With a sudden loud shout, Kushina bashed them into the water, forcing the water to splash highly in the air. Sochi only needs me. Sochi only needs me. Sochi needs no one but me. Kushina repeated to herself over and over. She rocked herself back and forth, quickly finding her mirth as she chuckled. Anbu-chan, Anbu-chan, you wear a mask and you appear kind, but Naruto-chan knows to put you in a bind. Kushina snickered. Kushina looked at the ripples of water that began to calm down from her former outburst. As she stared into the liquid, Kushina's face took on unbridled joy and unconfined amusement. Somehow, someway, the water mocked her as she noticed a person with bright blonde hair and blue eyes staring at her with a somewhat normal smile. Kushina looked at the image as her smile got bigger, but if one looked closely, specifically her eyes, they would have seen no joy or amusement, but only madness and murderous intent. Your fault. It's all your fault, Databane. Kushina shouted suddenly. Slowly and surely her body coated itself in red chakra. With one of her fists cocked back, she bashed it into the water, once again destroying the image and pushing the water upwards in a large splash. Outside, Naruto was faring no better. Tsubaki watched as his face contorted into a violent rage. The chakra emitting from his body was slowly raising. Tsubaki could feel its maliciousness. Naruto-kun? Tsubaki asked with narrowed eyes. Swiftly Tsubaki was performing hand signs for a paralysis technique and put the blonde back to bed. Naruto turned around to her. With a sharp laugh, his now red eyes glared into her form. Ka-chan wants blood, handler Onichan, Naruto replied sinisterly. Tsubaki could already see the signs of the chains protruding from his backside. Naruto-kun, calm down. What's the matter? Why does Ka-chan want blood? Tsubaki asked. Naruto's hands trailed the edges of his face. He brushed them against his whisker marks before they rested at his temples. Watch the life go away. Such delicious dango. So much. Too much. Make it stop. Make it stop. He wants more, but he can't have it. She has more, but she doesn't want it. Leave it alone. It's all a lie. It's all just a damnable lie, Datbeo. Naruto murmured. Tsubaki watched as Naruto looked at her, his eyes dazed yet somehow still dilated. Naruto-kun. Tsubaki called as she grabbed the unstable blonde's shoulders. She quickly touched his forehead with her index finger and took a deep breath. Kai. Tsubaki uttered. Swiftly Naruto dropped to his knees without a second thought. He slowly began to fall forward before Tsubaki caught him and pulled him into her embrace. She gently carried him in her arms as she made her way out of the door. The words that followed out of her mouth, she had no idea, would haunt her for many nights, many days, and many years. All right, Naruto-kun, Konoha will give you blood, Tsubaki replied before she vanished via Shunshin. A few well-placed flash steps across a couple of rooftops, and then, upon exiting the village, a few more well-placed dashed across the trees and Tsubaki dropped to the ground in a swift manner. Before her stood a tall, almost intimidating facility. The large black ironclad structure of the buildings blended in with the trees almost like a perfect dimensional shape. This was the torture and interrogation department, and right next to it was Konoha's maximum security prison. On its outside stood Danzo. The man looking just as foreboding as usual. Danzo took a glance at Naruto's shivering form. Even his eyes seemed to be shivering as they twitched at various times. It was like Naruto was literally trying to suck the warmth out of Tsubaki's body in order to get some kind of heat to help his shivering. Has something happened to him? Danzo asked. Tsubaki looked down at her handily in his quivering form. Naruto just clung to her body tightly. He muttered the word, death, over and over. No doubt Naruto could sense the malicious intent that made itself apparent within the prison, raising his reaction towards the sudden stimuli. Tsubaki couldn't help but feel that they were about to make a mistake. I am unsure. I believe that he is reacting to the intent within the prison, but I can't say for sure. In any case, your presence here greatly unnerves him, so I will have to ask that you keep your distance, Danzo-sama, Tsubaki said as she opened the door and took Naruto inside. Danzo watched her with a narrowed eye before firmly walking into the building right along with her. Academy. Iruka sighed for the umpteenth time. Uzumaki Naruto had failed to show up. Honestly, Iruka felt like he shouldn't have been surprised. Strange things always revolved around Naruto. Every time Iruka had been teaching, he had sometimes thought to how the students were faring. For some of his lessons, some students looked bored. Well, a majority looked bored, but others like interested. Uzumaki Naruto, Iruka wasn't sure about. The blonde always had that terribly strange, heart-clenching smile on his face. Ever since the taijutsu incident back during the blonde's first day at the academy, all the students had been wary of him, and Iruka somehow felt that it was all in good reason. Every question Iruka asked Naruto was met with a smile, a terrible joke, or sometimes a threatening glare. Iruka hadn't been able to pierce it together. Naruto was even more of a reclusive person than Aburame Shino, and the two might as well have been exact opposites. Iruka had contemplated that the Jonin, Tsubaki, who had been taking care of him, had taken him, as she seemed to be very responsible in claiming that Naruto had no reasons to ditch school. However, Iruka could tell that the mood in the classroom was a lot lighter with Naruto gone. It was rather sad, but that was the reality of the situation. Nonetheless, Iruka was a man concerned about his students, even one as odd as Uzumaki Naruto. Sensei, wake up. Iruka blinked himself out of his stupor. He noticed that he had stopped in the middle of his lecture. The piece of chalk that he had been holding had long since stopped writing. Huh, was the Chunin's most intelligent response. A good number of the students laughed at the expense of their teacher, much to Iruka's embarrassment. The Chunin rubbed the back of his head and followed up with a cough into his hands for attention. Has anyone seen Naruto-san today? Soon all laughter stopped as students turned their eyes to where the blonde was usually seated, that same side of the desks in the corner next to the windows. Who cares about that freak? Came a shout. Some other students gasped, but didn't respond. Kiba snorted as he folded his arms. He truly despised his blonde classmate. Why did he get all the free passes to ninjutsu, taijutsu and genjutsu? Why did he get to go home early? The guy couldn't be special or anything. In his seat, Uchiha Sasuke frowned before sending a almost missed glare towards the seat where Naruto usually sat. It was like the last Uchiha actually cared about what happened to him. Granted, he wouldn't have minded having what the blonde had in terms of getting out of all this nonsense that the academy called training. He wasn't going to get better, but he had to. Uchiha Sasuke was an avenger. His whole family had been murdered and he had been left alone to avenge their deaths by his accursed brother, Uchiha Itachi. Uzumaki Naruto utterly irritated him. Always cracking his jokes, smiling without a damn care in the world, and messing around. The guy had no idea how harsh life could be. Sasuke wouldn't say that he felt anything other than apathy to the blonde, even if he wished to destroy that never-ending smile on his face. However, he never could, since the blonde always had some reason from that Jonin woman Tsubaki to always skip out on the shinobi aspects of the classes. Shikamaru and Shino exchanged looks with each other and nodded. Both easily understood that something was utterly wrong. The other kids might have been blind to it, but the two clan heirs understood. Uzumaki Naruto was dangerous, very much so. For Shino, ever since he was treated to the display of Naruto ripping his messenger insect apart from its wings all the way down to its limbs, he had been cautious of the blonde. For Shikamaru, the blonde was an unbreakable puzzle. Shikamaru, despite his laziness, had always thought himself to be a good judge of people given his immense intelligence. Shikamaru had a way of reading people, but he could never completely read Uzumaki Naruto. That was one thing he was unable to decipher yet, like the most difficult challenge, Shikamaru, begrudgingly, wanted to solve. Anyone else wasn't about to bother with the blonde, least of all Yamanaka Ino, Haruno Sakura, or Choji Akamichi. The three would rather have stayed as far away from the blonde as possible. Never mind that he seemed to be an imbecile, but he was just downright creepy. Seeing their reactions, Iruka lowered his head grimly. He knew that he wasn't much better. Right, well, I'll be paying a stop to his house at a later date to see if I can't discover anything. Now then, on with the lesson, Iruka said, much to the class' dismay. Iruka couldn't stop the tiny grin that appeared on his face. Sometimes teaching just felt so good. Prison. It was truly the last place that anyone really wanted to be in, and yet it was one of the most filled places within Hino Kuni. Any crime committed within mankind's history books had been added to this prison by at least one person. One person to fit every other type of crime that filled the record books. Truly only the most hardened shinobi ever chose to guard this place. The constant screams of anguish and torment resounded throughout the halls on a daily basis. Men and women, some deemed to monikers such as demon of such and such, or killer of this and that. Screams, curses, and profanities littered the halls. However, today was a different day. Today was a day that many criminals often looked forward to. Especially those on death row. Hey, stop pushing me, you shinobi bastard. I'm walking already. One male voice shouted as a jonin shoved the man forward. Those criminals on death row had always had one opportunity. On the day of their execution, they always had matches. If they were able to win, then they got away free only with a chakra suppression seal created by the Sanin, Jiraiya himself. Call it a sick twisted game by some of the Konoha superiors in watching their criminals fight for their lives, but the world wasn't so kind as to merely let criminals go away free. They would fight for their lives to gain back that life that they abused. That freedom that they took for granted. Hey, this isn't any way you treat a lady, you dumbass. I'll kill you. Came the cry of a female, this time as a female jonin pushed her forward. Stop talking and continue walking, you criminal piece of trash, the female jonin snorted. It was a very short walk, but 10 shinobi took an individual 10 prisoners into a large, well-lit room. On the walls of the room were various shinobi gear and weapons. Explosive tags, kunai, shuriken, fuma shuriken, swords, mesh armor, all of it littered the walls. The prisoners were actually in relative awe. Each took notice that the ropes binding their arms and legs had been cut, letting them free. Their shinobi guards disappeared. Oi! What is this shit? One of them hollered. It should honestly be quite simple what this is. This is your execution for your heinous actions against Konoha. The male and female criminals looked up to see Danzo staring at them all coldly. Some of them shrunk back from his intense gaze while others merely looked on unfazed and unconcerned. Maybe if you tree fuckers stopped fucking your trees, then you wouldn't have so many enemies. Someone else cried out, letting a roar of laughter reverberate throughout the sounds of the chamber of the inmates. Some of the jonin guards frowned. One especially started to draw a kunai from his pouch, but he stopped when he noticed Danzo looking at him sternly. The jonin sucked his teeth before pocketing the weapon back. However, Konoha is the strongest nation for a reason. It is because we make the decisions that other shinobi villages are incapable of making. While there is light within Konoha's walls, there is also darkness, and that darkness will judge all of you. As followed by the Nadaime Hokage of Konoha, inmates are granted one last chance at their free lives by fighting any one person that Konoha picks. If you manage to defeat or even kill that person, then you are allowed to walk normally. We would do this one by one to be fair, but I don't have the time to waste on you ignorant masses. So the one who defeats the challenge will go free, Danzo said. Silence came through the crowd of inmates. Each looked to each other in relative silence. Bullshit. One of the inmates shouted. The others looked on as well in disbelief. Was this some kind of sick joke to get them to be complacent just before their deaths? No one was buying it at all. This is your decision if you choose not to engage. Know that you will die even if you reject the offer. Konoha is merely giving you the opportunity to bet your lives in the small hope that you get away. You can either refuse and die, or you can bet your life on the small chance of winning. All the tools around you are at your disposal. I suggest that you pick wisely, Danzo said before he walked away. Most of the inmates watched him leave. He's got to be fucking us right. There is no way they're going to let us go, is there? A dark-haired woman asked. One criminal narrowed his eyes and folded his arms. The criminal's expression turned joyous, a face of almost sadistic pleasure coming across his features. The man's fingers actually trembled excitedly. At this point, I really couldn't give two flying shits right now. If they're letting me get the fuck out of this prison in exchange for killing their so-called challenge, then I'll make sure the bastard never gets up again. I'll chop into tiny pieces and flush those pieces down into the sewers. He answered her before moving over to the wall to select his weapons. The woman moved to do the same. Inside a one-sided see-through window, Danzo stood surrounded by various shinobi. One of those shinobi only looked at the elder's back with disdain and utter disapproval. The man wore a large trench coat over his large body. A bandana was wrapped around his head, preventing anyone from taking notice of the countless scars that laid underneath from his many unfavorable years as a Konoha shinobi. Never in his career as a shinobi had he thought that Konoha would go through with this. Kami was he happy that his second in command was out on a mission at the moment. She would never forgive this if she caught wind of it. He knew the reason that this was necessary. Like a good number of other shinobi, he had been informed upon Uzumaki Naruto's release from the ward. Why would the higher-ups see fit to bring him here? You have something to say, Morino Ibiki. Danzo asked, bringing the head of the torture and interrogation department, headed within the intelligence division, out of his thoughts. Ibiki actually had a lot to say, but he knew that what he wanted to say was out of line and no doubt would be called upon if he did utter his words. No doubt he would have to speak with the Hokage personally after this. He hadn't signed up for this. He hadn't been the head of the torture and interrogation department, and the head warden of Konoha's security prison, to be doing this. No, Danzo-sama, Ibiki replied disdainfully. It was a type of disdain that Danzo instantly picked up on, but didn't comment. He didn't care. If it was for the good and benefit of Konoha, then what was one child's psyche? The shinobi world was cruel and unforgiving. In order to keep Konoha at the top, then sacrifices had to be made. Danzo stepped forward and pressed a small button. Tsubaki, bring him in. Danzo ordered, the sounds coming through a speaker. Tsubaki held Naruto in her arms in front of a door. There was no going back now. Tsubaki glanced to the blonde. Tsubaki was honestly surprised. Whatever effect the medication usually had on him was non-existent here. Naruto actually seemed to be clawing at the hem of his clothing, and why not? He could feel the sheer intention to murder, maim, and slaughter all behind the door. It was a sudden wave of cruel intentions washing over his 10-year-old body. Kushina really wasn't faring much better. So much blood, Sochi. So much blood for my Sochi databane. Do not worry, Naruto. Ka-chan will provide for you. Ka-chan loves you, Sochi. Kill them. Kill them all, Sochi. Kushina trembled excitedly. She could feel the red, shiny liquid in her body pumping rapidly into her beating heart. Open then door. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Open the door. Tsubaki frowned. This wasn't her mission. She had been charged to handle Naruto. How could she handle him if he were going to be delving deeper and deeper into his sanity until he became worse than he already was? No, this was the mission. All that mattered was the mission. Without the mission there was no order, and no order led to chaos. Tsubaki couldn't help releasing a sigh. No one's gonna blame you if you don't want to do this, Naruto-kun. No one's gonna thank you if you do this, Tsubaki replied, rather with a whisper. Naruto heard her, but didn't say anything. His attention was too far gone to relish on the words that she had spoken to him. Shaking her head, Tsubaki pushed the door open and gently placed Naruto on the ground. Immediately Tsubaki wished that she hadn't. She could see Naruto's grin quickly, almost instantly, turn into a downward frown. Flies, flies everywhere. Flies, flies, death beware. It comes for you in the night. It comes for you in the day. Your wings will be torn, your limbs will be cut. Your lives are the things that I will play, Naruto murmured as he walked forward. Tsubaki wasn't sure she saw it or imagined it, but she thought she saw Naruto's nails actually lengthen. Tsubaki closed the door and decided to return to the main room. Suddenly Tsubaki stopped. The feeling of dread had returned, more suffocating than ever. Tsubaki turned back to the door. The death row criminals turned their heads as they noticed a young blonde kid, that couldn't have been older than 12, enter the stadium. Some raised their eyebrows at him while others frowned. A few were actually concerned once they looked at his eyes. So full of unadulterated madness and dementia in them was enough to actually force one man to scream. The other criminals turned back to him in enough to see him shove a kunai into his heart before he hunched over dead. A child. We have to fight a child. I knew this was some kind of damn joke. One of the inmates shouted. With a kick, he sent the dead body crashing into the iron wall next to him. He's kinda cute, a woman said, licking her bottom lip. The Konoha shinobi in the room observed the interactions going on, albeit reluctantly. Danzo merely kept his gaze over the entire ordeal without letting any emotion show over his features. Danzo-sama, are you sure this is the only way? A shinobi asked. Would you like to be down there yourself? You're more than welcome to take the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's place, Danzo replied without taking his eyes from the center. All he got was silence for a response and what he assumed was the shinobi shying away in shame. Of course no one wanted to go down there with a bunch of deranged criminals, much less fight them. Anyone else feel the need to go down there and take the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's place? Danzo asked. No one said anything. All he got was silence. Ibiki bit his lower lip enough to make it bleed. Inside his coat pockets, his hands were trembling terribly, but he didn't speak. Danzo, in the meantime, snorted. Pathetic wimps, the lot of them were. It was obvious that none of them knew what it meant to be a shinobi. If Danzo had his way, not one of these people, probably save for the head of the interrogation department, would be a shinobi, but it wasn't his call to make. Then I expect all of you to remember your place and let me observe if Konoha's judgment is appropriate, Danzo said. He only got silence, which he indeed appreciated as he continued to watch. In the arena, one guy chuckled. Hey, if Konoha's got this kid's death wish, then I don't give a fuck. I'll murder the damn brat. A separate individual said before he got a raised hand. Now hold on, let me try something. I've always had a thing for younger guys, the dark-haired woman said before she slowly made her way towards Naruto. The Konoha shinobi watched the scene. Tsubaki had just entered the room and watched in silence as well. The feeling of dread had never left her. As the woman appeared in front of Naruto, she bent down to keep themselves at eye level. Oi, you gonna fuck the brat? Hurry it up, one of them shouted. The woman tried her best to tune out the other distractions. You have nice hair, she commented. Naruto looked into her eyes, and once he saw them, his smile returned. You look so cute. But you know, Madame San is a very busy woman. She was falsely accused by the people of this village and she wishes to get out. The only way she can do that is if she roughs you up a little. It breaks my heart to hurt such a cutie like yourself, but I have no choice. You understand, don't you? Don't worry, once you're healed up, I will pay you a visit. We can have so much fun. Just you and me, she said as she raised her hands into the air and gently caressed Naruto's whiskered cheek. Naruto's smile lessened. Kuso, this was a mistake after all. We've got to get him out of there. Someone instantly called. Sure, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki wasn't very well liked in Konoha, and sure a good number of the shinobi in the room thought he might have been better off dead, but throwing him to the wolves, or at least a room full of dangerous criminals, psychopaths, rapists, terrorists, and thieves was a little too much for anyone's humane. Somehow felt that urge also hitting the back of her head, repeatedly annoying her, but she stayed her hand. It wasn't her place. Move from this room and you will forfeit your life, was all Danzo said as he continued watching. Danzo-sama, with all due respect, how can you be so? All talking stopped instantly. A sound rang over the prison. How was it that it was so small yet so clear? Everyone widened their eyes in surprise. Words were lost in people's throats. They couldn't have said anything even if they tried. Danzo's hand clenched at his cane. It was merciless. Kushina had been angry, mad, rather dare she say livid if she didn't find it funny, like the word liquid. She put her filthy, disgusting, cold, slimy, pathetic hands on her son. Her son had trembled greatly from her touch. No one touched her son that did not entertain her. No one touched her Sochi, except for her. Get off him. Don't touch him. Let go of my Sochi Dattebane. Kushina cried hysterically. She thrashed her body around in the murky water violently. Kushina bashed her body against the walls surrounding her in a frantic manner. Her red eyes glowed with anger as she grabbed the strands of her hair. Quickly Kushina's body fired in bright red chakra covering her body. Ka-chan will protect Sochi. Ka-chan will protect Sochi. Ka-chan will protect, Kushina repeated over and over. On the outside everyone gasped. Naruto felt something drip onto his cheek, but he didn't focus completely on it. No, his face was contorted into glee at what was in front of him. The woman had wide eyes as a white chain appeared in the front of her skull and out the back end. The criminals and Konoha shinobi were stunned into silence. The woman had no idea what happened. Oi, did that brat just? One of the inmates spoke. Naruto raised his hand and swiftly the chain started to obey his commands. Naruto swiped his hand upwards. The chain exploded into the air in an upheaval, breaking the woman's skull open as she dropped to the ground, her blonde staining the floor and Naruto's shoes as a result. Ha, did you see her face, Ka-chan? Naruto asked with laughter. Kushina chuckled darkly. The sight of the woman's blood running along the chain slowly sated her. Hi Sochi, that was the best part, Databane. But looks we have more playmates. Play with them, Sochi. Let's see if they want to play too. Kushina replied. Naruto swiftly nodded before looking. The chain, like it was sentient, flicked the blood off its body before it continued circling around Naruto's body, rather sensually. Naruto raised one foot and stepped over the female corpse without a second thought. Nay, Nei-chans, wanna play with me? Let's have fun, Datbeo. Naruto replied. The inmates shivered. Did this kid just realize that he had killed a former leader of one of the nation's largest prostitution rings? And why was he laughing? Something was wrong. No, scratch that, everything was wrong. Some took a step back. Naruto tilted his head to the side. We're not going to play. No, play with me and Ka-chan. Play with me and Ka-chan. Naruto shouted angrily. Kuso. Fuck this. That kid is dead. One person said, wrapping a kunai with an explosion tag. He then precisely threw it, aiming it for the blonde's skull. Ibiki swallowed the lump in his throat as a resounding explosion stretched through the chamber. The place where Naruto stood was covered in smoke. The man who threw the kunai took a step back in relief. In fact, everyone did. However, that only proved to be a mistake. Without warning, a wet chain blasted in almost unseen speed. Everyone gasped as the chain pierced itself into the man's stomach region and forcefully expunged itself through the back. The chain proceeded to wrap the man from head to toe just like a snake before lifting him into the air. Demented laughter filled the room, its brokenness driving even those deemed to be inhumane towards the true precipice of darkness, lunacy, and instability. Hey, get me down from here. Arg! The man shouted. Some were actually more than ready to help him before they saw the chain ignite in gloriously hot orange flames. They covered the man's body. His deafening screams came outward for everyone to hear, but none could move to help him. Get it off. Get it off. Help me. Put it out. It burns. He shrieked over and over as people watched the gruesome scene unfold. After the laughter came a chilling voice. Rensa Miso. Kuso, chain burial. Inferno, the voice uttered. 3 more chains bursted from the smoke and wrapped around the burning man's frame. Over and over they wrapped his arms, hands, legs and neck until they retracted. The snapping of bones was apparent before the man was pulled apart in two, his blood washing over his former inmates. Everyone widened their eyes. Some even raised their hands to their faces in disbelief. It was falling like rain. It fell like there was a storm outside. The smoke cleared and everyone noticed Naruto was covered by a small wall that comprised itself of at least 10 or so more chains in length. Kill them, Sochi, were the only words that Kushina uttered. A dark red chakra tail appeared from her backside while her hair began to wave itself in the air. Kushina hissed. The chains released their protective barrier from around Naruto's body. Naruto snickered as his body schooled left and right. You tried to hurt Ka-chan. No one hurts Ka-chan. Naruto bellowed. Kuso. Kill this damn brat. One person ordered and one by one men and women were brought out of their stupors. Soon a rain of kunai came flying towards Naruto's person. Kushina looked at the onslaught with a frown. She placed her will over the chains. 5 chains rose into the air. Spinning around rapidly they clashed with the kunai, knocking each away with deadly precision, sending them to various points in the room. However, no one relented. Some just continued throwing whatever they could get their damn hands on, but the chains blocked them all, keeping them at a certain reach from their prize. Naruto and Kushina just laughed hysterically at the entire thing. Kuso. Can't one hit this damn brat? Asked one of the inmates. They couldn't keep throwing shit at him. They would run out eventually. They would all have to think of something. Nonetheless, Naruto and Kushina got another one, swiftly snapping her neck and dropping her to the ground before she could even blink. One chain coated itself in lightning chakra before dashing forward, slamming itself the head of various death row inmates, sending them to the ground instantly. We've got to do something. A woman cried before she rolled to the side and away from the incoming chains. So much malice. For Naruto there was so much malice and so much blood. It was too much. It was so much. So fun. So good. It couldn't end here. Stand aside. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, fire release. Grand fireball technique, one criminal shouted and with an exhale blasted a large fireball in Naruto's direction. Naruto watched the incoming fire before chains blasted from the ground and bashed into the fire. The criminal widened his eyes as he noticed his flames getting smaller and smaller. If a Hyuga were there, they would have noticed the chakra being drained from the fire by the chains, reducing it into nothingness. Naruto and Kushina merely looked amused. Ka-chan wants something more exciting. Naruto replied. Everyone stood surprised at the action. Naruto merely cackled rather painfully as he arched back, his maddening laughter a taunt to what everyone's intentions were. Just him. They just had to beat him and they were free, so, why was it looking hopeless? In the upper room, one shinobi quickly hunched over and retched into a bucket. Other merely turned away. Ibiki. He wasn't faring so well. The man merely tried to tough it out, but even he wasn't emotionless entirely. This could not be what Konoha was about. There was no will of fire here. There was no peace or fairness here. There was nothing but madness. And the worst of it, both Tsubaki and Danzo merely stood there watching without a damn care in the world. Ibiki grounded his nails into his skin through his fists. He would remember this. No, no, please. Save me. Save me. I don't want to die. One man shouted as a chain wrapped around his leg. He clung desperately with his arms to one of his fellow inmates. Let me go, you fucker. Get off me. The fellow inmate shouted as he kicked the man in the face. The chains aggressively pulled at his body. One wrapped around his neck and the others wrapped around his shoulder. Please, no, please don't leave me, he cried in tears before he was pulled away. Being raised into the air. He hovered over the field while Naruto closed his palm. Kushina maneuvered the chains as they pulled the man's legs apart, tearing them as his body fell to the ground. Crying, the man whimpered. Naruto titled his head to the side. Ni-chan broke. Dadbeo. Naruto spoke. A single chain hovered over the man's forehead before it launched itself down with enough force to crush his skull. Naruto smiled widely. Kushina cooed. Be happy, Sochi, Kushina replied. The expression in her broken features was easy to distinguish as merriment watching her son so happy and free. In response to his happiness and joy, Kushina was happy as well. This was her purpose, all of it. Nothing else mattered, not even Minato Namikaze. He was probably having a fun time within the belly of the Shinigami. Don't worry, Minato, Kushina was keeping there. No, her son safe. That's right, he was her son, no one else's. I will always care for you, Sochi. After all, you're mine, Kushina said with a wide smile. Blood. There was blood everywhere. Limbs scattered about left and right. Ever for a place as high up as the one-sided see-through window there were blood stains. How could a lone child be capable of this? How had Konoha created this insanity? Yes, this had to be Konoha's punishment. Enough, Ibiki murmured. It would have to live with this mistake, this result of its past. Why did this come to pass? Surely the boy's parents were turning in their graves. One lone criminal remained. And no, please, spare me, have mercy, he pleaded as he dropped his weapon to the ground with a clash. He wanted nothing anymore. He just wanted to go back to his cell. He just wanted to get away from this. Ni-chan, please play more with Ka-chan. She's lonely. She wants to play, Naruto said innocently. The chain slithered tauntingly towards the cowering man. His face contorted in fear and depression. So fast. The visions of his life were going by so fast. He couldn't handle them all. He could see where he made so many errors in his life. With his wife, his 2 kids, and with his murders. He had been in the wrong. He had been in the wrong for so long. Alright, he understood it now. He was sorry. He wouldn't do things like those anymore. Please, Kami-sama, just don't let him go this way. Even now the chains clanked across the floor mockingly. Naruto flicked his tongue around his lips before settling it back inside his mouth. As Naruto's impending form got bigger and bigger, the pressure of his chakra was overwhelming. So much anger, unstable rage, sorrow, depression, hatred, aggression, and pleasure all wrapped in one expression. After a few more steps, Naruto stood before the quivering man. Leaning forward, Naruto grabbed the man by his face and pulled him so close their eyes might as well have been touching. Can you feel it? It's here for you. It wants you. She's coming for you, Ni-chan. Spider on the wall, you love to eat your flies, now rest, for the fly will no longer be tall. Ha 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 ha. Naruto laughed in his victim's face. The blonde's trembling might as well have been sporadic now. The man whimpered helplessly as Kushina's chains slowly came in for the final kill. Naruto-kun. Game over. You win. Naruto stopped the chains just inches from the man's face. Win. Handler Onichan, it was just getting fun. Look, he's so cold. I just wanted to heat him up. Naruto said energetically as he turned around to see Tsubaki right behind him. That's enough, Naruto-kun. The game is over. We can go home now, Tsubaki replied. Naruto seemed utterly displeased for a split second before the smile overtook his features once again. The chains slowly disappeared as Shinobi and Kunoichi alike came on the scene. Ibiki appeared out of the door and walked over the death row inmate. He had never seen a more pathetic display. The man was curled up into a ball, shivering, quivering, trembling, stuttering, overall a mess of the former criminal that he once was. Put a blanket on him and take him away. Grant him his papers and in a week let him go free, Ibiki said, staring down at the man. But sir, he's in line for execution, one of the officers reported. Don't argue with me. Just do as you're told. Ibiki growled out fiercely. The Jonin quickly gave him a salute before he helped the weeping man to his feet. As he stood to his feet, everyone noticed the wet spot on the floor. No one commented. It wouldn't have been right. The Jonin took the inmate away, down one of the halls, never to be seen again. Ibiki watched them both until they disappeared. His mind was racing. Turning around, Ibiki noticed Tsubaki talking with Naruto about something as she wiped the blood off his face with a towel. He walked over to them. A lot of that was unnecessary, Uzumaki, Ibiki replied, his hands in his pockets. Naruto turned to him before he blinked his bright, broken eyes. A lot of ice. A lot of cream. A lot of ice cream, Dadbayo. Naruto replied with his arms open out wide. Ibiki frowned. He couldn't look at this. It was too much. He just couldn't be in this type of presence. One would think that when you were the head of the interrogation department, then you specialized in getting this result, breaking a person down until they told you what you wanted to know, but this was so much worse. This was merely being broken down for the sake of being broken. There was no purpose here other than pain. Is he hurt? Ibiki asked. Tsubaki closed her eyes for just a brief second. No, I do believe that he is well for the most part, Tsubaki replied. Ibiki slowly nodded in understanding. Suddenly, even more so without warning, Ibiki punched Tsubaki across the face. Some of the Jonin who were cleaning up the room gasped as Tsubaki fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Ibiki looked at her. Silence was the only thing present in the air. Naruto laughed slightly to himself while Tsubaki picked herself up. Danzo had just seen the action out of the corner of his eye. An intriguing development. Okay, that had not been one of Tsubaki's finest moments. Morino Ibiki had always been someone who could hide his intention rather well, even from the most talented Anbu. Tsubaki hadn't even sensed the attack coming until it came into contact with her face, knocking her to the ground. As expected of the head of the interrogation department. He had a mean left hook. Tsubaki leaned up and rubbed her cheek. A drip of blood flowed from her bottom lip. Tsubaki wiped it off before looking up to see Ibiki looking down at her with a look that she seldom recognized. There was utter disdain and disapproval in his eyes. Never set foot in my department again. So help me, if it's not an order from Hokage-sama, then I will kill the instant your intentions are confirmed. Now get out, Ibiki replied icily. Tsubaki frowned. This had been unexpected. Tsubaki hadn't been expecting such a violent reaction from the usually stoic Morino Ibiki. Tsubaki had slowly picked herself up. I do not remember the times where I had to acquiesce to your orders, Morino Ibiki, Tsubaki said. She heard the sound of footsteps. Looking forward, she noticed Ibiki was immediately at eye level with her. I am not a saint. I will never profess to be one. The things I have done have been bad and they are things I will take with me to my grave. However, I have never broken someone down to that. Look at him. Look at him, Ibiki urged. Tsubaki took a deep breath before glancing over to Naruto's person. Ibiki followed her eyes. Both noticed Naruto looking at the disembodied limbs splattered across the floor. His pupils actually trembled excitedly in his eye sockets. The blood on his hands seemed to further stimulate his senses. The entire room smelled of death and decay. Decay. De candy. Naruto quickly shouted at nothing in particular. He quickly fell back in laughter of his own joke, which his mother followed in as well. Tsubaki turned back to Ibiki. This is the mission. The only that matters is the mission. I do not care about your thoughts of me, but Hokage-sama has trusted me with this and I will get it done. No matter the cost, Tsubaki replied. Ibiki quickly frowned before he grabbed Tsubaki's Jonin vest and pulled her close. Then let me tell you something right now. You had better walk carefully around me. I will kill you if you set foot in my department again. Konoha has no need for things worse than scum, Ibiki replied. Tsubaki's eyes flared for a second in some type of anger, but it didn't stop as Ibiki leaned close to her ears. He imparted words not heard to anyone else. However, Tsubaki balled her fists once Ibiki backed away. Now take him and get out of here. I have to clean this place up, Ibiki commented. He walked away, leaving Tsubaki in the middle of the room. Tsubaki looked at the ground in anger. Quickly taking a glance back to the person she was supposed to be handling, Tsubaki widened her eyes. Naruto leaned over and poked one of the corpses. I broke Ni-chan, handler Oni-chan. Ka-chan, we played too hard with him Dadbeo, Naruto said. Tsubaki clenched her fists. What was she doing? Tsubaki didn't know anymore. With a small sigh, Tsubaki grabbed Naruto's body into her arms. Let's go home, Naruto-kun. You need a bath, Tsubaki replied. Naruto giggled in response. Kushina, on the other hand, was a different story. The redhead walked up and down the walls of the mindscape. Her eyes dilated and filled. What could give a mother more pleasure than protecting her son? Nothing. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock winds down. There is a child with a lasting frown, Naruto spoke. Kushina sniggered as she looked at the ceiling. Keep him safe. Keep him near. I've got something for you to fear, Kushina finished before she jumped from her spot and fell into the water below. Her body slowly vanished into nothingness. Fanfiction.net. Just in. Community. Forum. V. More. Chains of the Broken by Kyuubi Goku. Anime, Naruto rated. M. English. Drama. Naruto U. Kushina U. Words. 55k plus. Faves. 967. Follows. 970. Published. June 16, 2014. Updated. June 16, 2015. 182 Chapter 4. KG. Well, I guess I just wanted to try to get my mind off my more popular stories for a brief moment. This just seemed like a good one to do since I rather enjoy writing it personally. KG. Naruto's not here. Thank God. So I can probably write this without worrying about my life, or my soda. Seriously, why do you all target my cream soda? What did my soda ever do to you? Do you like spilling innocent soda just to get back at me? And to think I thought of you all as my family. My very, very dysfunctional family. Music of the week. Lion by Hollywood Undead. Quote. Insanity is relative. It depends on who has who locked in what cage. By Ray Bradbury. It was night time. The Sandame sighed behind his desk as he signed some of his usual documents. The day's events grew on him, making him weary of the coming other days. He just had received the latest reports from Tsubaki regarding Naruto and what he had done just a couple of hours ago. Sarutobi had held his head down in utter shame as he had clenched the paper in his hands upon reading it. The mission was a success, but whatever sanity Naruto might have begun to recover was instantly overcome by his desire for his insanity. Hiruzen didn't know what to think of the report. He honestly just wished he could burn it and throw it into the trash can, never to be seen again by anyone. However, he couldn't do that. It was filed away for a later time. Slowly Sarutobi found it in him to return to his work, however the thoughts never left his mind. Konoha had broken its Jinchuriki. The fact that even some seasoned Jonin and Shunin wretched at the sight only confirmed Sarutobi's fears. Naruto had long since reached that point of no return. Hiruzen long since knew this, but the fact that this happened because of Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, the very first village created by the benevolent Shadaime Hokage, Hashirama Senju, was only something that left a bitter pill for Hiruzen to swallow, but if it was for the good of the village, then he only hoped that when Naruto found eternal rest that he would find it in his heart to forgive him. Because of these thoughts, Hiruzen was surprised to be taken from them by a set of footsteps. They were hard and firm. They also held a significant amount of anger. The chakra radiating from behind the door was something Sarutobi could easily identify, but he didn't shy away from it. In fact, he welcomed it. Tsubaki had said so in the report that someone found the events that transpired those few hours ago distasteful. There was a knock on the door. Whoever was angry still had the sense to remember who they were addressing. "Come in," Sarutobi said with a final sigh of resignation to his fate as he watched the door open. "What can I do for you, Ibiki-san?" Sarutobi asked. Somehow, Ibiki's form looked a lot bigger. "Hokage-sama," Ibiki said as the head of the torture and interrogation department of Konoha's structure marched towards his commander-in-chief. Hiruzen didn't look the least bit concerned or worried as Ibiki slammed his hands on the desk, nearly shaking its very foundations. The stern look of disgust, anger, fury, and overall hatred of those past events was clear in the Sandame's eyes. "What, in Kami's name, do you think you're doing?" Ibiki asked angrily and with a glare that could very well have destroyed the village faster than the Kyuubi did 10 years ago. Hiruzen took a deep breath of his pipe and exhaled. "You're going to have to specify." "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of," Sarutobi said. Both were aware that the man was trying to stall for as much time as he could get. It was clear that it was annoying Ibiki greatly and Hiruzen wished he could apologize for it, but it would have been a rather moot point regardless. "If you have something you wish to say to me then please speak your piece," Hiruzen said as he continued with the papers that he was signing. He just couldn't bring himself to look Ibiki in the eyes. Nails clawing at the desk, blood rushing through his body, Ibiki closed his eyes. "Hokage-sama, cut the bullshit," Ibiki said, swatting the papers that Sarutobi was signing to the floor. The Anbu in the room flinched and seemed ready to move at a moment's notice, but didn't as there was no immediate threat. Plus some of the Anbu knew Ibiki. The man was about as loyal to Konoha as they came. "I want to be given 2 reasons as to why I shouldn't dislocate Tsubaki's head from her shoulders," Ibiki said with a firm glare. Hiruzen looked up and into the eyes of his subordinate. "Well, for one, this is a mission I had assigned Tsubaki to do." Which she had indeed proven herself very much capable, Hiruzen said, holding up one of his fingers. With the second finger came a glare, a rather fierce glare. One that made Ibiki give pause. "Second is that assault upon any Konoha shinobi is result in immediate imprisonment of the person who assaulted the individual for at least a minimum of 10 years. I don't think you would like to spend such years in prison, would you, Ibiki-san?" Hiruzen asked while Ibiki remained silent. Taking a deep breath, Ibiki slowly backed away. He went over to the fallen papers and slowly began to pick them up. "Hokage-sama, I have been under your leadership ever since I was a fresh out of the academy genin. Never once have I doubted your intentions towards Konoha, until now, sir. Hokage-sama, how can you possibly think this is right? The things I saw, the things Uzumaki Naruto did, where is the benefit of Konoha in these actions?" Ibiki asked as he continued picking up papers. Hiruzen looked down at the ground. Not even this happened for genin out of the academy during the Third Great Shinobi War. There is no hope for the boy. Why make him suffer this way? Where is the will of fire here? Ibiki questioned adamantly. Hiruzen looked away. He didn't know. For once, he really didn't know. When it came to Naruto, Konoha's will of fire was merely drowned in a sea of hopeless despair and unforgiving, unrelenting sadness. "It pains me, Ibiki. I never wanted Minato's legacy to come to this. I read the reports from Tsubaki. She has a vivid imagination. I got the experience. I can't tell you where it's all going, Ibiki. I just hope that with this, Naruto will be able to protect Konoha from her enemies," Sarutobi said while Ibiki watched the man known as the professor take his pipe from his mouth. Fumes exited his mouth as he closed his eyes. "There is nothing more I can do for Naruto-kun except make sure that his insanity works out in Konoha's favor. I can do nothing more," Sarutobi said, and Ibiki watched with wide eyes as his Hokage put his head into his hands. Even now Ibiki could see the signs of aging in the form of wrinkles in the Hokage's face. How tired had the man been? Silence reigned for a time until Ibiki spoke up. "Do you even have a plan for when he will graduate?" Ibiki asked as he placed the papers back on the Hokage's desk. He was very tired if he were honest. He just couldn't interrogate or torture anyone today. Not after today. "I can't imagine many people will be thrilled to be working with a psychopath. Much less a Jinchuriki psychopath," Ibiki said, making Hiruzen nod his head. I have a plan for that already. In truth, there is no purpose in sending Naruto-kun to the academy. Even I know he will never, like a normal person, comprehend the ways of chakra or the subtle natures of shinobi life. It's why I had long since arranged for him to be a graduate regardless of his scores. Granted, he would be the dead last, but given this condition, then it's only what we can hope for. As for his Jonin sensei, then I'll have to give that job to Tsubaki as well, as she's his handler. Hiruzen spoke, making Ibiki snort at just the thought of the woman. His threat still stood. I see. Well, Hokage-sama, I highly disagree with this action, and even more so I'm disgusted by it, but I will stay my tongue. Have a good day, Ibiki said with a bow before he closed the door. Hiruzen frowned before he placed a finger to his chin and for the umpteenth time, sighed. It was very late, wasn't it? Konoha has no need for things worse than scum, worse than scum, worse than scum, than scum, than scum. Tsubaki opened her eyes and leaned forward from her bed. She took note of the drops of her sweat falling to the bed. Frowning, she dropped out of the bed and walked through the halls of Naruto's rooms in the apartment complex. She opened the door leading to Naruto's room and peered inside. He was sleeping soundly. How interesting that even the insane, when they slept, could pass off as normal. Slowly closing the door, Tsubaki walked to the fridge for a bottle of water. This was merely the mission. She had been ordered to do this. It's not like she cared about it regardless. Konoha wanted a weapon, then it would get its weapon. It was no skin off her bones if when they took Naruto away they did as they liked with him. He was a tool just as she was, only difference was that she was a rational tool. Konoha had no use for things worse than scum. People who didn't complete the mission and follow orders were lower than scum. People like Tsukumo Hatake were lower than scum. It was just a mission. Well, I remember reading that Morino-san was close to Hatake-san. No doubt he probably found the man's death to be unfair. It doesn't matter. This failure is not an option, Tsubaki said. Most would find her cold and heartless for dealing this way, but Tsubaki didn't care what people thought about her. It was one of the reasons why she had one of the lowest percentages for teammate-based assignments. She could never cooperate with others without some kind of conflict. Still, she didn't enter into this profession to be liked. She merely entered into this profession because it was the only thing we're doing. Nothing else mattered. No one else mattered. There was just the mission. As Tsubaki went back to her room, she closed the door. As she closed the door and slowly fell back to sleep, Naruto had woken up. The maddening grin on his face slowly appeared. He could feel his handler in the next room slowly beginning to fall asleep. Oddly enough, he didn't speak. The silence of his room was humorous. Even now his body wouldn't stop shivering. All of the blood had most likely soaked into his body. He had absorbed it. His mother never stopped whispering sweet things into his ears. He truly loved her very much, and he was even more happy to know that she loved him. He would do anything to make her happy. Sochi, we have company. Naruto's eyes seemingly brightened at these words. He stood to his feet and kicked away the covers. He slowly opened the door from his room and into the living room. He walked out the window. Towards the bright, shiny window, Kushina said with a wide smile. Naruto pressed his face to the window. It was out there that he could see them. 5 bodies, 5 pairs of eyes, all looking at him behind animal masks. They seemed surprised that he had spotted them, but they didn't move. Naruto's face pressed painfully into the wall. He grinned at them all and waved. Naruto didn't make the attempt to perceive that they were shorter than the standard Anbu that had been in the blonde's life. He only just looked at them. It wasn't long before they slowly faded out of existence. Naruto watched them go. Anbu Nichans and Nichans go bye-bye, Naruto said to his mother. She nodded from her place in the seal. She had watched them go as well. She wished that they had come over. The party that the kind leafy shinobi threw for her and her son just hours ago had left them wanting more. Unfortunately, they had fallen asleep somehow and missed the festivities. People screaming was a good thing, right? It was screams of excitement, right? If Tsubaki had been awake, she would have seen the smile on Naruto's face slowly leave and a quick fit of anger overtake his features. Naruto growled like an untamed animal as he stared out over the Konoha village. So many squishy dolls, just waiting to be snapped up by a grinder. A total of 3 days passed before Tsubaki allowed Naruto to continue at the academy. Their routine hadn't changed. Naruto's standing in the class continued to plummet from not completing his assignments. He was somewhere with the Inuzuka heir and the Nara heir in terms of academic standing, but more and more the Hokage and Tsubaki continued to tell the teachers that Naruto's grades wouldn't matter in the long run and that when graduation day came, they would give him his headband. After all, it wasn't like the insane could truly comprehend homework. Plus Tsubaki wanted to keep Naruto calm and relatively sane, relatively being the main word here. To be honest, the only thing that stopped Hiruzen from just plain giving Naruto his headband had been Koharu and Homura of his council. Now Sarutobi didn't believe the two held any ill will to the body, but questioning them they came out with stating that it would make Naruto too suspicious to not only the other academy students, but unnoticed Chunin and Jonin. It was something Hiruzen could understand. No one would have wanted to know that Konoha's broken, unstable Jinchuriki had graduated from the academy before everyone else granting him permission to kill in the name of Konoha. It was a chilling thought. Tsubaki held Naruto's hand as she guided him towards the academy. It was strange, but based on Naruto's current behavior, she wondered if he were still feeling the effect of the events of 3 days ago. He was a lot less jittery, but he definitely looked at the civilians more closely. It was like he was eyeing and picking his potential prey. Now Naruto-kun, what are you going to do in class? Tsubaki asked with a disarming smile. She had gotten a little used to smiling this way. Naruto slowly turned to her. Listen to my teachers. Don't let others crowd around me and don't pick fights. Naruto understands that he does. Naruto replied with a wide grin that told Tsubaki otherwise, but she nodded as they appeared before the doors. Effortlessly, Tsubaki guided Naruto to his classroom and slid open the door. Excusing herself, she bowed to Iruka and walked away, leaving Naruto with his class. However, on the outside, Tsubaki quickly hopped over the top of the building and landed in her clone's usual tree branch for a vantage point. One would think she didn't trust Naruto. They were absolutely right. Who would trust someone who slaughtered 50 inmates and convicts 3 days ago? Meanwhile, Naruto took his spot at his seat, isolated in his little island of desks while the other students sat to the right of him. Naruto wasn't oblivious to the stares of malice on some kids and their faces. However, they looked so quirky. They looked just like clown faces. Naruto just kicked his feet across the floor. It was an interesting way to spend his time. Scarface-chan went on about some things Naruto found funny, like the Nadaime dying in the Second Great Shinobi War and talking about the 5 elemental candies, or was it counties? Mounties. Whatever it was, Naruto enjoyed it all the same. He was also happy that Scarface-chan indulged him with his jokes. The kids would always have on those fake expressions of terror that Naruto had seen in so many of his other playmates. It was a shame he couldn't play with them, as Tsubaki warned him about large crowds. Naruto took it in stride. Stridles. Naruto suddenly shouted, making the class jump. Tsubaki raised an eyebrow from her place on the branch as Naruto snickered to himself. Iruka turned to Naruto for a brief moment before sighing. Naruto-kun, please don't interrupt my lessons, Iruka said rather tiredly. It had only been about perhaps a few weeks to a month that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki attended the academy, and already Iruka was feeling tense. What was the Hokage thinking? Iruka knew no doubt that the state of Naruto's condition was the village's fault. Perhaps even he had a part to play in it as well. Still, why was Konoha's #1 insane Jinchuriki in a classroom with all the heirs of the clans and academy students? It made no sense to the Chunin. Am I just thinking about it too much? Other than his outbursts in class, he's generally a good student. Picks no fights, remains happy, and he doesn't antagonize, Iruka thought to himself before he shook his head. Sensei, I believe Uzumaki-san was referring to the striddle of items on your desk. He just mispronounced it wrong. It's a common mistake, came the voice of someone no one expected to talk. The Aburame clan heir turned a small glare toward the blonde who was in his corner laughing as he clutched his stomach while rocking in his chair. Ever since Shino had tried to figure out the anomaly that was Uzumaki Naruto, he had found himself paying much more attention to the blonde than usual. Ever since Shino had seen the blonde torture and finally kill one of the insects that he sent over, Shino had taken to watching Naruto out of the corner of his eye. The feeling he got from his insects was that Naruto was dangerous, perhaps even more dangerous than Shino actually thought possible. Shino hadn't had the pleasure of knowing people who acted like Naruto. He could tell something was off with the blonde. No matter how the academy or teachers twisted it, there was a reason the blonde was here and there was a reason that they let him get away with as many of the things that he did. Shino also had a sneaking suspicion that the Nara heir was the same way. Then there was that woman, Tsubaki, who always came to relieve Naruto before taijutsu practice. Shino doubted Naruto had some kind of condition that kept him from being there, as the blonde wouldn't have been in the academy if that was the case. Yet at the same time, Shino also wanted to ask his fellow classmates some questions, but he had the sneaking suspicion that he wouldn't be alive in the aftermath if he did. He had remembered asking his dad about the enigma that was Uzumaki Naruto. His father only remained silent, telling Shino to not meddle in affairs that weren't his business. It was one of the few times he had seen his father shaken up. "All right, class, now we're going to have a test," Iruka said with a wide smile. The groans of the many students in his class was like musical bliss to his ears as he began to hold out papers. Slowly each student looked at the object of their disdain. Well, all except one. Naruto just looked out the window as he widely grinned to himself. Well, to everyone else that's what was happening, but in reality Naruto was having a talk with his mother about the big, yellow daisy in the sky and how it was the only daisy that made them funny inside. They also wondered if that large daisy would ever turn the walking dango sticks in the street into a crispy brown treat as the red delicious jam slowly oozed out of the bodies. Both Uzumaki found it to be an amusing thought. "Now then, you have 30 minutes to complete your test. No talking," Iruka emphasized before sitting in his seat. However, one of his students raised their hand. "Oi sensei, what about the blonde weirdo over there? Why doesn't he get one?" the Inuzuka heir asked with a small snarl. The other kids looked over and shivered as they watched Naruto making gestures with his hands on the desks as if performing some kind of play with said fingers. He seemed to really be enjoying himself and whatever he was doing. It actually unnerved the students. "Oh wait, don't tell me he really is dumb," Kiba said with a small smirk that got a couple of laughs from the kids. Iruka sighed from his place and moved to reprimand Kiba for his statement, but he chilled as he heard Naruto speak. Puppy-chan ate some bad food one time. Puppy-chan wasn't feeling well one day. Puppy-chan knew he shouldn't have eaten those things, but he did. Slowly, Puppy-chan went to sleep whimpering, his mind twisting and turning. Puppy-chan broke. Puppy-chan loved his master. Puppy-chan loved his household. Puppy-chan would do anything for his family. Puppy-chan just wanted to be happy. However, Puppy-chan knew he wasn't normal. One day, the master came back home. He wanted to see his family, that he did. He went to his house and opened the door. Hey, do you know what Master-chan found? Naruto asked. The academy students stiffed as Naruto looked at them all with his wide smile. Tsubaki leaned a little forward on her tree to be ready to intercept at a moment's notice. Master-chan found his family, laughing. They were all laughing with Puppy-chan in the living room, but Master-chan didn't know what was funny. He asked them what was funny and they stopped laughing. In the light, Master-chan could see white, thick whipped cream on his daughter, son, and wife's faces. He could see it on Puppy-chan as well. Puppy-chan smiled. He wanted his whole family to be with him. He wanted his whole family to be no different from him. Yet he was hungry. The family was hungry. Puppy-chan wanted to provide for his family. You know what Puppy-chan did? Puppy-chan bit Master-chan. Master-chan fell backwards as Puppy-chan crunched on his bones. Slowly Master-chan's wife, son and daughter joined in as well. For days they feasted on Master-chan, and Puppy-chan was so happy. Now Master-chan would live inside him, forever. Naruto said, sending the point of his story home, making children shiver. Shino and Shikamaru narrowed their eyes while the Uchiha heir raised an eyebrow. The other clan heads looked away from the unsettling look in Naruto's eyes. Why did it look like he was about to attack them? And they all lived happily ever after. Databane, Kushina said as she hung upside down from the ceiling of the mindscape. The wide smile that rested upon her features would have unsettled anyone before she made a hand sign. Puppy-chan no jutsu. Kushina said before laughing as her feet popped off the ceiling and left her dive head first into the sewer-like waters below. A deep plunge sent her going through the water depths. On the outside, no one said anything for a minute before Iruka coughed. Good story Naruto, but leave it for after classes if you want to scare your classmates. Now then Kiba, back to your question. The reason Naruto doesn't get one is because he's exceptional. It wouldn't matter if he had to or not. Now all of you get to work, Iruka said before taking his seat at his desk to do some paperwork. Many of the students grumbled, but out of the corner of Shino's eyes he could see Shikamaru with his finger to his chin obviously contemplating Iruka's statement. Shino wanted to think more on it as well, but he decided not to do so, at least for the portion of the test. However, unknown to him, there was also someone else who was interested in the blonde. Uchiha Sasuke stared at Naruto who was seated at the far back and far left of the classroom. Initially he had thought nothing of the blonde or what reasons he had to join the class, but he was exempt from every taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and weapons training class. Why would he? Exceptional. Was he so good a shinobi that he didn't need the classes? Yet, there was nothing about the blonde that reminded Sasuke of power. He would crack jokes in class that repulsed the class and the teacher or just suddenly shouted to himself before laughing like some kind of madman. Sasuke just didn't understand it. What the guy some kind of prodigy? Sasuke highly doubted it. Well, he would just have to focus on his test. It wasn't like anything else mattered at the moment. In little to no time, the test had been passed by the students and, after 3 more classes, lunchtime began to roll around. As per his instructions, Naruto remained away from the groups of students with his bowl of miso ramen and a small box with vegetables at a small bench. Naruto wanted to behave for Handler Onichan. When Handler Onichan was happy then Naruto and Ka-chan were happy, for whatever reason. Naruto merely kicked his feet happily as he toyed with his food via his wooden stabby objects in his hands. One thing about the seal that Kushina had also found out, before the incident was that because she could experience all the things he experienced then she could even experience the rich tastes of the ramen that she so long missed. In her place, Kushina jumped for joy in the air multiple times having her hair flail around as she spouted out her praises to the ramen gods or whoever she was supposed to be praying to. In a branch just a few feet away laid Tsubaki as she watched Naruto eat his food. It was strange. How could someone like Naruto even attempt to comprehend his situation right now? Tsubaki didn't know, but she also could feel that beneath this calm experience was a maelstrom of rage and anger that was only being temporarily subdued at the moment. Tsubaki thought she was slowly beginning to learn Naruto's moods. He didn't seem to have any backlash from the incident at the Konoha prison 3 days ago, or so Tsubaki would have liked to believe. It was subtle, but she saw it. He was a lot more jittery even after taking the medicine a few times. Either the medicine was very slowly losing its effects or Naruto's chakra was so unstable that it was now having its highs and lows, something Tsubaki hoped wasn't the case. She couldn't imagine if even the Anbu could safely apprehend the boy if he flew into a murderous rage. Tsubaki sighed. Hey guys, look, it's the blonde weirdo. Tsubaki whipped her head around the tree and noticed a group of about 5 young male academy students grinning as they looked at the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. In contrast to her neutral expression, Tsubaki's mind was a storm of situations and possible countermeasures to those situations. There was a reason she didn't like the academy growing up. Well, she supposed every kid had this growing up, such stupid false bravado. Truly she pitied the Jonin sensei who would get these kids, that is, if the kids even passed, which she doubted highly. Such people were unfit to be shinobi. Still, Tsubaki had to move to intercept. Meanwhile, Naruto didn't seem to acknowledge the children just yet as they walked over to him and crowded him. Oi, Iruka-sensei really seems to think you're special. I've heard about you. My parents told me not to even bother associating with you. They call you a menace. You know what you look like to me. A damn chump and a weakling. There is nothing special about you or your damn jokes in class. Why is it that you get to goof off and not get scolded? Wipe that damn smile off your face. The obvious leader of the kids snarled as Naruto looked down at the ground. Kushina's smile twitched sporadically. Naruto clutched at his bowl. No one saw it, but his nails scratched the outer rim of the bowl several times. His body shivered as if trying to find warmth in a blizzard of cold. Slowly, so slowly, the menacing chains protruded from Naruto's backside. No, Naruto just had to leave. He had to remember Handler Onichan's words. He should just go back to the classroom and eat there. He had to behave. He would behave and would not get in trouble. He promised. I promised Datbeo. I promised. Naruto trembled. He slowly stood to his feet. Yes, he promised. He swore. He would never let his mother feel malice. Naruto chuckled as the chains exploded from his backside. The kids around him widened their eyes and fell backwards as Naruto's heart pumped. Yes, this feeling of insane death and excitement. He would get to play with Oni-chans and Oni-chans again. He would have toys to play with again. Up in the tree, Tsubaki stood to her feet ready to intercept. She would have a talk with the academy teachers at a later date. However, fate didn't seem to be with Tsubaki as she covered her ears in shock and surprise as Naruto, and by connection Kushina, let out an unholy, unearthly scream. The scream shook the 5 classmates as they covered their ears. The world is spinning. 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 Don't look at me, with those eyes. Drown it all away. I promised. Naruto shouted as he lunged for the lead boy of the group. His trap-like hands gripped the boy's throat as he squeezed. I promised. I promised. I promised. I promised. Naruto shouted over and over as he began to wring the life out of one of the academy students. The boy's coughing and gurgling were easily heard as he choked upon his own saliva and bile that began to rise in his throat. The 4 boys fell to the ground in shock as the chains flew into the air and wrapped around their throats. Screams along the academy grounds were as Naruto raised a fist into the air and bashed it into his tormentor's face that he had been strangling. Stay away. All of you. Stay away from my Sochi. You don't deserve him. You never deserved him. I am the only one who deserves Sochi. Kill them Sochi. Kill them all. I love you Sochi. Ka-chan loves you. Never will I let them hurt you. Never will Ka-chan allow them to hurt Sochi again. I will never let it happen. Kushina said as the chains slowly began to coat themselves in fire and lightning. Her hair began to raise itself into the air in response to her maddening anger. The 4 boys bound by the chains screamed as they spasmed out of control, and before Naruto could deliver a second fist, he felt his arm grabbed. Naruto, stop this right now. Tsubaki said as she grabbed his arm to keep him from doing more. Naruto didn't respond to his handler as the chains only seemed to crush the boys' windpipes even faster than before. Their screams brought a number of academy teachers to the yard, including Iruka and Mizuki, as they watched in surprise and shock. Naruto cackled as his left hand still held the academy student by his throat. The boy gasped as tears fell from his eyes. He could see his friends' bodies twitching from the burning and the lightning in each body. The slow roasting smell of burnt carcasses filled his nose. Then he looked into Naruto's eyes. Those sickening eyes. Those demented, disturbed, inhuman eyes. Tsubaki issued a small curse as 2 more Anbu dropped to the ground. Hold him now. Tsubaki ordered, and the Anbu quickly moved to obey. As both moved through their hand signs, stripes of earth erupted from the ground and wrapped around Naruto's body, sending him falling forward. Naruto laughed as his left hand let go of the kid he was strangling. The academy teachers quickly moved to drag the boy away. The boy coughed repeatedly as Naruto was held down. Putting a finger to his forehead, Tsubaki released a surge of chakra that quickly shut down Naruto's body, causing him to fall forward and unconscious. However, the same wasn't said for Kushina. They hurt her baby. They teased him and sought to harm him. She wouldn't let it stand. She wouldn't let them stand. Toys broke all the time. 4 more wouldn't be a problem. Don't worry Sochi. Ka-chan will punish the naughty kitties. They won't hurt you anymore, Kushina said, and with that made the Anbu, Tsubaki and the academy teachers go speechless as the chains that surrounded Naruto's body, the same chains that held the boy's 4 friends in their grasp, tightened, sickeningly crushing their esophagus, restricting airflow until the heads popped from the bodies and dropped to the ground. The 4 bodies twitched and spasmed before dropping down forward. The heads rolled into the bushes as the blood from the 4 bodies stained the ground and Naruto's clothes. One of the female academy teachers, Suzume, fainted before Mizuki quickly caught her. Iruka's body trembled. Out in the hot sun, 4 academy students lay dead at the unconscious Naruto's body. Everyone watched as the chains from Naruto slowly disappeared into his backside. Like clockwork, Tsubaki picked up Naruto into her arms. Assemble Hokage-sama and inform him. The day has shifted. I'll take the Kyuubi Jinchuriki to a secure location, Tsubaki barked before swiftly vanishing away before the Anbu could even reply to her commands. However, seeing that she left, they left as well, leaving a confused, frightened and horrified group of Chunin teachers. However, inside the academy windows stood also 2 pairs of eyes that reflected that same horror and confusion as they stared at the 4 dead bodies of their former classmates and the deed done by another classmate, Uzumaki Naruto. X. In an undisclosed location, Hiruzen, Tsubaki, Ibiki, Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan, Shikaku Nara, head of the Nara clan, and the head doctor of the Konoha hospital watched as Naruto screamed against his restraints. Everyone watched the chains around his body swirl frantically. Naruto shouted out over and over as his chakra saturated the room with an unholy amount of anger, anguish, pain, and killer intent. It was no one's doubt that Naruto would have killed, or made the attempt to kill, them all if he could see them right now. What happened? The Sandaime asked slowly and, strange enough, calmly. Tsubaki took a brief look at the situation before turning to her superior. It was lunch time. A group of 5 children weren't pleased with the fact that Naruto didn't have to take a test given by academy teacher Uruka Yumino a period before the lunch time. They crowded around him and antagonized him. It didn't take long for Naruto's expression to turn violent. I apologize, Hokage-sama. Had I acted quicker, Tsubaki would have finished if the Sandaime hadn't raised his hand for her to stop. He took a deep breath and sighed as Naruto shouted his hardest once again with a maddening screech. His nails clawed at the bed as his chains whirled around. Tsubaki and some other Anbu had just barely gotten him restrained in time for him to continue his rampage, which also caused the death of 1 Anbu and 1 female nurse. That was 10 minutes ago. No doctor dared go in with him like this. Ibiki frowned as he watched. It still made his blood boil just hearing the maddening cries of a child that was like this. Granted, yes, Ibiki had indeed known the grim sides of the shinobi world, but he had never seen this before. The chains swirled widely in the air as they bashed the walls and even the window, separating everyone from the rampaging, demented child in the room. Shikaku's advice had been for everyone to just wait for him to tire himself out and then intervene. Hokage-sama, we can't send him back to the academy. Not like this. Perhaps not at all. Also, Tsubaki-san, you knew he would get like this with crowds. You understood that and sent us your report. Why didn't you react quicker? Inoichi questioned as Tsubaki looked at him. I had not been entirely sure of the situation at the time. I had also hoped that Naruto would remember my instruction on what to do in crowded situations, but I had misjudged it, Tsubaki said rather calmly while Inoichi tightened his grip on his hands that turned into fists. How could the handler of Naruto actually speak so calmly? Didn't she know what had just transpired? She had to be a little concerned. You misjudged it. Because of that misjudgment, 4 academy students are dead in the morgue right now. Backlash from the civilians is only going to increase against Naruto-san as he grows up. The teachers are going to tell the parents of the deceased what happened. It's because of that misjudgment that Uzumaki Naruto is the way he is right this instant. Inoichi said, and just as he did, a chain bashed against the window as the straps kept Naruto's form in place. Inoichi looked back at the blonde before he looked away. They couldn't have truly created this, could they? People are definitely going to call for Naruto's blood in some way, shape, or form. One thing I don't understand though, Tsubaki gave him his medication before he entered the academy. By all accounts he shouldn't have been excited enough or had enough chakra to do those things that he did. Wasn't the medicine not only to keep him in check, but to also help him retain some level of sanity? Shikaku asked as Tsubaki looked away from the mirror for a brief moment. I did question that myself, and I have a couple of theories on that, Tsubaki said, bringing everyone to her attention. Tsubaki found the extra seconds of time to catch her thoughts helpful before she began speaking. At first I had theorized that perhaps his body was getting accustomed to his medication, so the effects would gradually lessen over time to the point that they would be near non-existent, but the effects of the medicine were definitely there when I gave it to him at the start of the academy. Naruto's mentality is that everything and everyone will in some way, shape, or form harm him, and that harm triggers the hostile nature of his insanity where his body will instinctually protect itself from others. However, unlike others, his insanity can be controlled in the sense that one has to make it seem like a game for him to understand that no real harm was going to be meant to him, even if it were the opposite case, Tsubaki responded. Shikaku raised an eyebrow before he scrapped his scalp. While it is theorized that the mentally unstable are more prone to acts of violent behavior, I don't understand how that would signal to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki that he can flip it like a switch, the head doctor said, making Tsubaki look at him. I mean, how do we categorize the mentally unstable? It's either by their moods or their behaviors. I dare say that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is far more unstable than we let on. The medicine that we gave him was also medicine that we tested out on the other patients. Some are still on that medication to this day from 10 years ago. I don't believe Uzumaki Naruto would be able to grow accustomed to the drug in only a month, the doctor said again. What were the results after you gave the first test subjects the medication? Ibiki asked with a stern look on his face that showed the others he was no amused by this situation. Well, it was a given that no one was either, but it seemed to be much more apparent on Ibiki than anyone else. The head doctor turned to him for a brief moment. Ibiki could see the man was unnerved by his gaze. He obviously asked a question that the head doctor had hoped that no one would. Ibiki narrowed his eyes. The head doctor gave one last swallow. At the first results of the medication we were amazed at how calm our subjects were. We had found a correlation between the chakra in the body to the insanity. As we all know, insanity or mental instability is a something done to the brain. Our search has shown that chakra can also influence this instability based on how much chakra is contained within an individual. The chakra will stress the brain twice a normal stress amount times the base number of how much chakra a person has, the head doctor said. What do you mean by the base number of how much chakra person has? Inoichi asked. The head of the Yamanaka could already see the head of the Nara clan already beginning to put the scenarios and calculations in his head. It sometimes amazed him that his friend was as analytical as always. It was only when Shikaku widened his eyes and stared at the frightened doctor that Inoichi could tell he wasn't going to like the answer to his question. If a normal person who has chakra of about 50%, then that amount is added to how much stress it puts on the brain. The amount of pressure of chakra on the brain would be very odd, but, in Naruto's case, his base chakra is at least a bar over Hokage-sama's. That chakra is going to grow even more as he gets older. Add that to the Kyuubi's chakra, then there would be no one on earth who had as much chakra as Naruto, Shikaku said as the head doctor held his head down. Wait, I don't get it. So Naruto-san has an astronomical amount of chakra. That shouldn't be a surprise, as most, if not all, Jinchuriki are known for having massive amounts of chakra that could equal or dwarf Hokages, Inoichi said while Shikaku rubbed the top of his forehead. The headache slowly began to form. He looked at Inoichi for a moment before Tsubaki took the time to speak. I would have to imagine that we should use a rock and a glass of water, for example. Let's imagine that the rock is the human brain and the glass to be the human body. Lastly, the water will be chakra. The glass always holds water of a certain amount. That certain amount is one that the rock can comprehend and adjust to. As the glass grows bigger, little by little the water gets bigger, but it's so small that the rock can keep up with it and adjust to it accordingly with minimal stress. This is more or less done through training of the body, mostly by shinobi, but imagine if we suddenly drop the glass of water with the rock into the ocean. That much water would over time crush the rock from the depth pressure. Taking into account that the brain isn't as hard as a rock, then we can surmise that Tsubaki didn't finish as the Hokage looked back to see Naruto still shouting like a wild, deranged animal. That the brain will be put under insurmountable amounts of pressure from which it would never adjust. The seal by the Yondaime Hokage was meant to filter the Kyuubi's chakra into Naruto so that he could use it if he needed to. However, as he's like this, he's only increased his son's suffering, Hiruzen said while Tsubaki nodded. However, that's not everything. Isn't that right? Ibiki asked, glaring at the head doctor. The man swallowed the lump in his throat before finally sighing. He nodded as he took a step forward and placed his hands on the glass that kept Naruto away from them. The doctor's eyes were actually pretty tired from what everyone could see around him. He tightened his left fist into a ball before he placed his head to the glass. The results came back that the patient could retain some measure of their lost sanity by, for lack of a better word, taking the medication. It was basically to suck away all the chakra removing pressure from the brain and dispel it into nothing. However, returning results estimated that the patient's returned chakra was much denser and his chakra coils much more constrained. In other words, the person's chakra capacity had grown, the doctor said. No one said anything. The gravity of the situation came crashing down on them all like an avalanche to the land of snow. As you all know, chakra coils are trained only at the expenditure of chakra. That is how the body works. When we drained their chakra to zero, that chakra returned at least a small percentage stronger. Draining the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's chakra with the medication for this last month has, without a doubt, perhaps doubled, worst case scenario tripled, his chakra and reinforced his chakra coils, the doctor said, and suddenly he found his body slammed against the wall courtesy of Ibiki. The anger in the T&I department's leader was apparent as he held the head doctor by his throat. He hasn't even trained with it, so it's a doubt that he'll access all of it, but it's still unsettling to think about. Hokage-sama, we have to stop the medication and come up with another countermeasure, Shikaku said while Hiruzen looked back at Naruto and widened his eyes. How hadn't they all noticed? Naruto stopped thrashing. Right now he was just giggling and grinning as his eyes stared at the ceiling. The chains had disappeared. Do it now, Hiruzen ordered fast. Quickly doctors and nurses rushed into the room. A couple of chunin held Naruto's body down as the doctor injected the blonde with anesthetic. Naruto's grin slowly faded as he closed his eyes. He dropped his head to the pillow, out cold. Nighty-night Sochi-kun, Kushina said as her body swayed left and right. Her eyes slowly got droopy. She fell into the water, knocked out as well. No one moved for a moment as the nurses pulled up the covers up to Naruto's chin and turned out the lights. Everyone exited, and most importantly, none were injured. Hiruzen watched the medical staff exit and breathed a small sigh of relief, but that didn't last long as he turned to the head doctor with a fierce glare. How long has this information been hidden? He asked. The head doctor hung his head down. Since the medication's distribution, he said. Inoichi, Shikaku and Ibiki steeled their gazes at the man. Tsubaki, however, was the only one that was looking at the sleeping blonde. An unsettling feeling seeped into her body as she watched his chest rise and fall. She then closed her eyes and turned around. We are going to have a long talk very soon, Hiruzen said to the head doctor. The man just nodded as Ibiki dropped him to the ground. With him to the ground, the others continued talking about where things had to stand currently. It was weighing on their minds, the fact that they might just have made Naruto's insanity a lot worse with the medication that they were giving him a month ago. Well, I also have to believe that despite the doctor's intentions, Naruto's body would have still grown accustomed to the medicine in time, and its effects of attempting to drain his chakra would have been near non-existent. The possible damages would have been far beyond our expectations, but Hokage-sama, I do believe we have been looking at this wrong, Tsubaki said as the others looked at her. Shikaku seemed to already know her thoughts, so he spoke. You mean we wouldn't need the medication if we just kept him calm the normal way? But the case still stands that he is a threat to the people of Konoha. Even with your word, Hokage-sama, we can't return him to the academy after today. It would be blatant ignorance if we did so. I would suggest we just pass him early and give him a team of chosen people and a sensei. I would suggest that we put him down, but given that now then that might not be the best policy. Also, we have no countermeasures against the Kyuubi if it gets loose. Bothersome. Why can only a Uzumaki hold the Kyuubi? Shikaku questioned. His words were met with individual sighs. Well, we'll discuss this for another time. I'll focus on quelling the anger of the civilians. Tsubaki will continue to monitor Naruto and be his handler. Ibiki will take care of the head doctor along with myself. Thank you for your time, Inoichi, Shikaku. You both my return to your duties, Hiruzen said. The two jonin quickly nodded before walking away. Tsubaki bowed as well before standing to watch Naruto in the room. His motionless body was oddly disturbing. Meanwhile, Ibiki dragged the head doctor away despite his pleas that he could walk himself. Ibiki wasn't going to give the man such a luxury. He had a lot that he would have liked to vent anyway. Sarutobi sighed. Tsubaki, I am going to have to change your mission parameters. The Sandaime said. Tsubaki didn't even register the command as Hiruzen slowly disappeared into the hallways. Tsubaki watched him go before she looked back at Naruto. Tsubaki widened her eyes as she touched the glass window. Tsubaki trembled as she saw Kushina standing beside her son. The way the redhead's hair slowly began to form into 9 tail-like appendages. Could hair count as an appendage? Still, Tsubaki watched in slight horror of Kushina's eyes. Her blood red eye slits glared at Tsubaki with something that Tsubaki couldn't identify. Was that hatred, joy, contempt, happiness? Tsubaki, for all her Anbu experience, couldn't place it. The hair, tails, things on Kushina's hair grew in size. The tails rushed at the glass and Tsubaki felt the sweat on her brow actually fall from her face as the tails cracked the glass just inches from her face. Tsubaki wasn't known to be terribly afraid of many things. Fear wasn't what she considered to actually rule aspects of her life, but she could feel its claws slowly wrapping around her as Kushina stuck her tongue out at Tsubaki. Tsubaki then watched as Kushina leaned her head over Naruto's form and kissed his forehead. Her hair tails caressed his face lovingly. She then turned over to Tsubaki, whose eyes never left the action. Kushina walked over to the glass and stood before Tsubaki. Tsubaki didn't realize it, but she swallowed the lump in her throat once Kushina opened her mouth. A type of screech exited her mouth, forcing Tsubaki to cover her ears. It lasted only for a moment as Kushina closed her mouth. She raised her finger and pointed towards Tsubaki. You sleep just like Sochi. Kushina shouted as a mighty roar escaped her mouth and blew such a force against the mirror that Tsubaki felt her knees grow weak. As Tsubaki fell to the floor, she widened her eyes. The room was empty. Naruto was still sleeping silently. Tsubaki rubbed her eyes and stared forward. Nothing. There was no presence of Kushina that Tsubaki could. Glass wasn't even shattered like she had thought it was. There was just nothing. Tsubaki placed a hand to her face. She looked down at the droplets of water. She had been sweating hard. No way she could have imagined that, could she? Standing to her feet, Tsubaki turned her heels and walked away. She needed to get some air. For once, she just wanted to be anywhere but where she was. But she just knew that this wasn't going to be an easy thing to get accustomed to. In the council room sat Sarutobi and his 3 council members, Homura, Koharu, and Danzo. The 4 members looked at each other before Koharu closed her eyes. We should put down the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He's not even a rational human being, let alone a weapon for Konoha. The news travels fast. Already people are going to be hostile towards him for his actions at the academy, especially the parents. They are questioning the academy's actions in why Naruto was put in the classes in the first place. 4 dead academy students. I don't think an academy murder has ever happened, Koharu said. It was then that Danzo leaned forward as he turned a small look to Koharu. And just where would we put the Kyuubi? Or are we really going to rely on that foolish seal master, Jiraiya, to try and replicate a sealing jutsu of the Yondaime's caliber, without sacrificing himself? I don't think so. If there was one thing the Uzumaki always intrigued me with, it was their abnormal longevity. Besides, if we did somehow manage to transfer the Kyuubi, we all know that it would be at most a year for the next Jinchuriki's seal to deteriorate again. We would keep transferring the Kyuubi after a death and release, which down the road will only worsen Konoha and its population, Danzo said, making the others in the room nod. Perhaps we should donate some of the boy to the hospital. We could try raising some Uzumaki from there. There are a lot of women who lost their children in the Kyuubi attack who want children, but can't go through with adoption, Homura said, making the others glance at him strangely. He admitted it was a sensitive topic, but there wasn't much that he could do about it. They had to consider all topics and nothing could be off the table at this point. We have to face facts that Uzumaki Naruto is not clear for the delicate work that a shinobi must do, Homura said while Danzo snorted. That is questionable at the most. His abilities are interesting. Even against criminals who have committed heinous acts against the land of fire as a whole, he still managed to instill utter fear and horror into their eyes. One even expressed so much fear that it swayed Ibiki Morino, one of Konoha's most ironclad shinobi, to show mercy and grant the man his freedom. He slaughtered everyone else, without a scratch to his person, Danzo said, making Koharu raise an eyebrow. You can't possibly compare criminals to shinobi, can you? Koharu asked while Danzo turned to her. His stare told her alone that more than a few shinobi had been in that slaughter and not one of them had walked away from the event. Kaharu kept herself quiet as Danzo looked back to the Sandaime. Instead of sacrificing the entire future of Konoha to keep replacing the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, I would suggest that we sacrifice only 2 people. If fate is lucky, then they will emerge all right, but if it's not, then Konoha will know that their sacrifice for her sake would be appreciated, Danzo said. At best we will be sacrificing 2 more genin or potential genin from the roster to do what I suggest, but it's better than the alternative, Danzo said, making the others nod. Hiruzen leaned forward. And what idea would that be? Hiruzen asked. Danzo quickly stood to his feet and reached into his dark, black robe. Swiftly he pulled out a couple of papers and threw them to the ground. The Sandaime, Kaharu and Homura each picked up some papers before Sarutobi widened his eyes. This is, Sarutobi turned a small glare to Danzo while Danzo looked down at him. He nodded. This was the plan. It was better this way. After all, shinobi were those who endured until they had no more to give. It was in this that the time of shinobi was instilled. That night, Naruto slowly opened his eyes. The anesthetic was slowly working its way out of his systems. The large grin on Naruto's face returned. He didn't behave. What were they going to do to him? The same thing the civilians did to him those many years ago. Naruto chuckled at the thought of it. What do you do when you're hungry and with no food around? Eat your fingers, then your toes, and everything in between, Datbeo. Naruto called with another small laugh. Trying to lean up, Naruto found his body restricted by a set of restraints. He chuckled. It was the same setup as his play suit. Naruto liked his playsuit that he did. He always wore his playsuit when the Anbu Nichans and Nichans gave him food or when he had his psyche evaluations, which never lasted long anyway. Well, it didn't matter. The playsuit was nice and comfortable. Slowly Naruto turned his head towards the door, feeling the massive chakra signature behind it. He smiled. Gigi. Ko, me in. I won. Na si yo, you Datbeo. Naruto sang in a happily odd voice. He noticed the door slide open, revealing the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha. Hiruzen looked to be holding a stack of folders. Naruto's blue eyes enlarged for a moment on them before looking up to see the Hokage's weary smile. How are you doing, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked as he took a seat at the bed. Naruto tilted his head to the side. He could feel the Anbu chakra signatures around the funhouse he was in. They all seemed to be looking out into the distance. They were all like little birds, ready to be skinned by the claws of a cat, just waiting to pounce on them all and devour their skin and bones like the puny, pathetic, uncaring assholes that they were. They were all pathetic. Slowly, Naruto somehow managed to find himself before looking back at Hiruzen. I misbehaved, Gigi. I ate too much red dango. Will I be punished? Will you, my Nichans, and Nichans, kill me? Naruto asked. For a brief moment, Sarutobi was sure that he saw a look of hoping in Naruto's eyes, but it vanished so fast that he questioned it. Hiruzen merely took a deep breath and stilled his voice. No, Naruto-kun. We're not going to punish you, and we're most certainly not going to kill you. However, we will not be returning you to the academy for this incident. However, Naruto-kun, I need to know something. It was then that Sarutobi held out the folder. A scattering of pictures fell on Naruto. The blonde raised an eyebrow and strained his neck to see, but it wasn't to any avail. Pick 2 people, 1 male and 1 female who you are interested in the most, Sarutobi said, making Naruto blink. He then felt Sarutobi kneel and undo the blonde's restraints. Feeling freedom come to him, Naruto leaned up and snickered over the many walking meat sticks that had faces. He looked them over for a second. He then touched a photo. Her, she is Bunny-chan. And him, he is Pine-chan. Naruto said, grinning as he pointed to 2 photos. Hiruzen looked down and he grimaced. Did her really have to pick the young one? Hiruzen trembled. How was he ever going to explain this to his friend? He didn't know. He was sure that the news would devastate the father and mother, but it was for the good of Konoha. It would be fine. Hiruzen had to keep telling himself that it would be alright. Are you sure, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi asked, making Naruto stare at him. Sarutobi was one guard as Naruto snarled suddenly. Them. I like them, Gigi. Naruto said angrily. Hiruzen just nodded as the smile seeped its way back into Naruto's features as Sarutobi collected the photos and began to put them away into the folder. He then stood to his feet. Very well, Naruto-kun. Thank you for your input. Just understand that you will have to wait 2 years for the girl and 3 for the boy. They are still in the academy after all. You get some rest. I'll organize everything, Hiruzen said. Naruto just looked at him as the Hokage turned to leave. Oh, and Naruto-kun, I'm so sorry, Sarutobi said as he closed the door to the room. Naruto was silent. His entire body trembled. He chuckled dementedly, but if anyone looked through his window then they would see the Kyuubi Jinchuriki laughing, as tears fell down his eyes and into his sheets. His broken laughter echoed through the walls of his room, reverberating their madness. It would be a while before he stopped, but he had all the time in the world. 3 years passed by for Konoha. The murder of 4 academy students was met with a harsh call for the Hokage to do something against the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Many people even convinced themselves that the Kyuubi had taken over the boy, which only sent a majority of the village into mass hysteria for about 3 months. The disappearance of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki over the corresponding 6 months quelled most of the people. Granted, students were scared of their former classmate hearing that the blonde was a part in the murders of some of their classmates. It was truly a testament to the Sandame's patience and will for the betterment of Konoha that allowed him to deal with the many complaints over those years. It had really waned on his will to keep it all up, but somehow he managed to persevere. The 3 years had been incredibly draining. Tsubaki still took care of Naruto or handled him as best she could, but even she had to admit that he was a handful at times. For the past 3 years, Tsubaki had lived with Naruto on the very top of the Hokage stone faces. She still seemed to keep the Kyuubi Jinchuriki at arm's length, but she was also picking up on his habits just as well since they lived together. Dare Hiruzen say that she was getting comfortable around him, perhaps not attached, or maybe never attached, but at least comfortable enough that she wasn't paranoid. Much there was a little cottage up there for an retired innkeeper that had been sworn to secrecy or risk death if he disclosed the location. So far no incident had been reported over the last 3 years, so the Hokage was sure that the man was keeping his side of the bargain. Tsubaki had kept Naruto off the medication for those past 3 years, and it was safe to say that his chakra and his coils didn't expand enormously like they had 3 years ago when they learned that the medication was responsible for at least doubling his chakra capacity and the potency of said chakra. In hindsight, it was a very good pill for shinobi if they could manufacture it, but Hiruzen already knew its side effects, so he didn't bother with it. The losses far outweighed the gains. Still, this was a day that Hiruzen was dreading immensely. It was graduation day. It saddened his soul, but it was for the village. He could only hope someday he would find solace in his actions. A knock on the door forced Hiruzen to look up. It was Tsubaki, who had come through said door with the same stern, professional look on her face that he always remembered. The woman really hadn't changed, except her hair seemed to be more braided than normal. I am to assume that I will be meeting Naruto's teammates at the cottage. The girl has already been a genin for a year, so I suppose she'll have substantial skills, but the boy who just got out of the academy, I will have to devise a test for him, Tsubaki said with a little disdain. To Sarutobi it was obvious that Tsubaki didn't want to become a jonin instructor. Even if her official status was an Anbu, she didn't want to be in charge of little children with petty dream of stardom in the shinobi world. Hi, I will have them directed to you in a couple of hours. Tsubaki, I don't need to remind you of what their purpose is, do I? Hiruzen asked, making Tsubaki swiftly shake her head that she didn't need to be reminded. However, that didn't mean it didn't leave a bad taste in her mouth. No doubt the head of the T&I department would be displeased with her, if she cared. Spinning on her heels, Tsubaki walked out of the door, leaving the Sandame Hokage to his own vices. Hiruzen took off his hat and placed it on the desk. No amount of tobacco smoke would help ease his mind of these circumstances. At this time, at the academy, Iruka was looking over his students. Even now the mood for his class has never changed, as most of his class still looked visibly disturbed that a murder had happened via their former blonde classmate. Most couldn't help at times looking at the place where the blonde once inhabited. If one wanted to be an outcast from the other students, then some would have said that they missed the blonde, if only because he at least made class awkward, and awkward was better than boring. Still, the class was tense. Some of the students felt it prudent to talk with counselors or their friends. Others tried bravado in dealing with it. Sasuke Uchiha glared at the seat where Naruto once sat 3 years ago. When he had heard that the blonde had killed 4 academy students, he had been skeptical. How could that clown have killed anyone? But Sasuke had felt a shiver when the lone surviving kid of the group of 5 returned to class. People had surrounded him and bombarded him with questions, but he was forever silent. It was only then that Sasuke learned the boy had lost his ability to speak from the horrific events that he saw. Sasuke had sought to actually find Naruto, so he asked the teachers, but everyone was eerily silent. It was only Iruka who told Sasuke to let it go and to never go looking for Naruto intentionally. Sasuke didn't understand all the fuss, but he did decide to let it go. Shino and Shikamaru were also puzzled by these strange events. It was undoubtedly that they saw correct on that day. Shikamaru and Shino had seen their teammate, Uzumaki Naruto, behead 4 of their classmates while dropping their bodies to the ground with chains. Shikamaru had actually retched on the floor while Shino took him to the hospital. The mysteries surrounding the blonde only grew deeper as both heard that Naruto wouldn't be in class anymore. For Shikamaru, it was a little bit of a letdown as he wanted to directly confront Naruto about that day. Shikamaru couldn't tell if the same was for Shino or not. Shikamaru's way of dealing with the events were to essentially not think about them, but for his type, that was kind of hard as it was always on his mind. He wanted to figure out the enigma that was Naruto. Not only did he not have to take assignments, tests or quizzes, but he also never got into ninjutsu, taijutsu, or genjutsu classes. Basically everything that the kids were there to do, he never did. It was like he was just there for the sake of being there. Then there was the woman who retrieved him every day when the classes were just about over. Tsubaki-san, if he recalled it right. What was her connection to all this? Shikamaru didn't know. He would have liked to have talked with either Shino or Choji about it, but both didn't seem to want to think about it. Ino and Sakura were quiet, which was another thing Shikamaru and Shino noticed. They still bickered on annoying occasion, they were a lot more subdued. Hinata Hyuga was a lot quieter, if that were even possible. Kiba was, perhaps, the least affected out of everyone. Still, Shikamaru couldn't ever get this feeling out of his stomach. For the last year, his old man and mom had been spending a lot more time with him than normal. Whatever he wanted to do, whether it be train, look at the clouds, or sleep, they allowed him to do it without a word of complaint. Yet at times, Shikamaru was sure that his parents looked sad. Almost like he was going somewhere. Currently, he and the rest of his class had just graduated the academy. Their teacher was going on and on about what it meant to shinobi, their duties, how they were essentially the worst of the worst shinobi, but with training they would become more powerful and the will of fire, all that troublesome stuff. It was then that Shikamaru saw Iruka hold up a piece of paper. That said, we will now fit you into teams as you wait for your Jonin-sensei to arrive. Remember that this is a first step for you. Team 1 Amy Kaido, Eiichiro Oda, and Akira Toriyama, Iruka said before continuing down the line. Team 7 will be Sakura Haruno, Uchiha Sasuke, and Tachibana Hatake. Your sensei will be Kakashi Hatake, Iruka said, and suddenly the boys rolled their eyes and the girls snarled as Sakura jumped from her seat proclaiming the power of true love, and that dumb shit. Shikamaru glanced towards Tachibana and noticed his small scowl. Either he was upset with his placement or it was something else, Shikamaru wasn't sure. Well, it seemed like Iruka was continuing regardless. Team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi, Iruka said then. Shino and Shikamaru shared a look before they looked back forward. Team 9 is in a situation at the moment, so I'll move on. Team 10 will be Choji Akamichi, Ino Yamanaka, and Neji Hyuga. Your Jonin-sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi. Choji, Ino, Neji is from a more recent team and will thus meet with you in this classroom a little later. The composition of Team 9 came out with the conclusion that one of the other students would be the apprentice to the Jonin, Maeda Gai-san. That is all the teams for today, Iruka said, closing the folder. Shikamaru widened his eyes as he leaned his head of the desk. Other students' eyes seemed to gravitate to his form before Choji raised his hand. Iruka-sensei, what about Shikamaru? He passed just like everyone else. Why doesn't he get a team? Choji asked, making Shikamaru sigh. If this was anyone else, Shikamaru would have been annoyed. Way to be the concerned friend there, Choji. Still, it did puzzle Shikamaru that he wasn't getting a team. Was he getting some kind of special thing too, like an apprenticeship? Talk about troublesome. Shikamaru hoped to Kami that his master was lazy like him. Upon hearing Choji's question, Uruka's eyes fell downward and he frowned. Uruka took a deep sigh, remembering the things he had discussed with the Hokage and a couple other teachers. Uruka pushed his hands inside his pockets and pulled out a piece of paper. Uruka stood before Shikamaru and placed the paper in front of him. This is where your team will meet, Shikamaru. You are required to be there in 1 hour from the time that class is to be let out. Be safe, was all Uruka said, and that didn't make Shikamaru feel like he won the lottery as Uruka walked away and closed the door, thus signaling the end of the academy for all graduating students. Shikamaru looked down at the paper ominously. Choji moved to sit next to him. That sucks. I was hoping to be on a team with you, Choji said while Shikamaru shrugged his shoulders. Shikamaru sighed once again. He was probably going to be doing that a lot in the near future. Thanks for stating the freaking obvious, Choji. I'm assuming there is a reason he didn't say my team out loud or my sensei. Well, if worse turns to worse, then I'll just deal with it. It can't be that bad. Good luck with your team, Choji. Knowing you got Ino of all people, she'll probably boss you around like the troublesome woman she is. In any case, I have to go. I'll see you around, Shikamaru said as he picked up his things and walked out of the door. Choji watched him leave before he also noticed the various Jonin sensei begin to come into the room. Choji wished his friend good luck as well. After leaving the academy, Shikamaru rubbed the back of his head as he looked at the direction. The map pointed to the very top of the Hokage stone faces. Whoever drew this map obviously would never cut it as an artist. Scratching his scalp, Shikamaru looked at the pictures of all the old geezers on the stone wall. I have to walk all the way up there. Troublesome, Shikamaru said to himself. Finally making it to the base of the Hokage stone faces, Shikamaru began to climb its very, very, very long staircase. He had to admit that the wind in his hair was an excellent breeze. All the while he kept thinking about why his team was being structured the way it was, or if he was getting a team at all. He hoped that after this long walk he would get the opportunity to go over some things with the Jonin sensei that he would be assigned to. Perhaps I can also ask about that troublesome blonde from 3 years ago and that event, Shikamaru thought to himself before finally, oh gods, finally, making it to the very top of the monument. Shikamaru took a small breath to ready himself. It was then that Shikamaru noticed someone else there. Obviously a girl. She was balancing a kunai on her fingertips. Her bun-shaped hair made Shikamaru raise an eyebrow as she looked at a piece of paper. Strange. He had never seen her in the academy before, but she had on a headband just like him. Please don't tell him he was on a team with a girl. Girls were troublesome creatures Shikamaru could never understand. Wiping the starting beads of sweat from his brow, Shikamaru stuffed his hands in his pockets and slowly made his way over to the girl. Can I assume you were called here too? Shikamaru asked. The girl lowered the paper and took a good look at Shikamaru before she sighed. Yup. Just got reassigned from my team today. Hokage-sama's orders or something like that. I was to report here for my permanent reassignment. Strange. I've never seen you before, she said while Shikamaru shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, I've never seen your face in the academy either. The name's Shikamaru Nara. I just graduated from the academy a couple of days ago, Shikamaru replied, making the girl widen her eyes. A recent academy graduate. Why was she being placed on a team without someone who was behind her? As far as she learned in her studies, this type of thing had never happened before. She had left a team that she had been growing so accustomed to and moved into one with a lower genin. A genin with almost no combat experience. Well, she doubted she could handle even 2 chunin by herself, but the point still stood. Well, her teammates had wished her well. Her Jonin sensei and his new apprentice had practically bawled their eyes out talking about the springtime of youth for her, while the other just gave her a plain goodbye before talking about his reassignment as well. Well, I've been a genin for about a good year now. My former Jonin sensei thought AC rank would be fitting to say goodbye. I got about a rather minimal record for right now. 45D ranks at the last time I counted, she said, making Shikamaru sweat drop. 45D rank missions and AC rank, potentially more, was minimal. He could tell this was going to be interesting. Well, if we are teammates, then nice to meet ya. I'm Tenten Higurashi, the young girl named Tenten said, making Shikamaru nod his head. No sooner than Tenten saying those words had both heard footsteps. Peering into the forest overgrowth, they noticed a woman in a Jonin vest coming up to them. Her eyes were cold, distant, calculating. It was like she was analyzing everything about them just from their appearance. Her presence and pressure were truly formidable. It was almost otherworldly. I knew I should have stayed in bed, Shikamaru thought to himself as the woman made her appearance before the both of them. Shikamaru Nara, Tenten Higurashi, on time as I expected you to be. Good work. I am your sensei, Tsubaki, starting today. Tomorrow you will pack your things from your homes. I hope you made peace with your former lives with your parents and your homes, because you will never return to those again until a long time in the future. Out here is a cottage which is supplied with all of your needs. You will be living here from now on. Any questions? Tsubaki asked with her arms folded. Tenten held up her hand. Yeah, where our third teammate? Tenten asked. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes at the girl. For whatever reason, Tenten thought she asked the wrong question as she withered under Tsubaki's gaze. Tenten swallowed the lump in her throat before Tsubaki turned around. She began to walk into the forests. Shikamaru and Tenten glanced to each other before they moved to catch up with their new sensei. He is already in the cottage. We will meet him shortly. However, I will advise you right now, specifically you Tenten-san, discard the weapons and do not show them unless I allow you to do so, Tsubaki said, making Tenten blink. She quickly pocketed her kunai while Shikamaru glared at the woman's back. He then closed his eyes. Looks like he would get his answers faster than he had assumed. You're the woman who always looked after Naruto Uzumaki, aren't you? Is he our teammate? Shikamaru asked, and as expected of an Anbu, Tsubaki didn't lose stride in her steps. It wasn't so out of the ordinary that he had known who she was. She was actually surprised that he didn't pick up on it faster. Shinobi had to be aware of these things. I see the Nara are still as intelligent as always. That's right, Shikamaru. I am Naruto-kun's handler. He is your third teammate, Tsubaki said, and turned to get a good look at the reactions of her new team. As expected, Shikamaru widened his eyes while Tenten stopped walking entirely. She looked at Tsubaki like the woman was the most insane person over the face of the earth, but that was a title belonging to someone else. Tenten shivered. She had heard the stories. She had been in her second to last year of the academy when she heard it happened. You mean we're going to be teamed up with a psychotic killer? Tenten exclaimed, just ready to turn around and leave. To her credit, Tsubaki didn't let her new team's reactions get the best of her. There were at least 30 different ways she could catch them before they even made it halfway back to the stairs of the Hokage stone faces. Shikamaru just looked hard at her, something Tsubaki didn't really mind. You are Shinobi of Konoha. It doesn't matter if you're on a team with a person who has killed one person or 1,000. Much blood will be spilled by the both of you in the name of this village. That is what you agreed to when you became Shinobi of Konoha. I was told I had to design a test in order to truly prove you to be genin, Tsubaki said. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow while Tenten slowly nodded, but straightened up. You mean, we're not going to have a test? Tenten asked. Tsubaki turned around. She stared the two straight in the eyes before closing her eyes. She really was no good with children. She would rather take facing a ton of A rank missing in by herself with an arm behind her back, one eye closed, and a sprained ankle instead of children. Good times. Well, adventure times were for another time. I'll be honest. I find the academy that the two of you grew up in to be fickle, lackluster, and overall a shadow of its former self. In 4 weeks we will take a C rank mission. If you pass, then I deem you fit to become shinobi, and if you don't, then I drop you from the program. Hokage-sama has given me that authority, Tsubaki said, which was a rather blatant lie. Naruto was the one who requested these two, and Konoha needed Naruto calm, which meant they had to go along with most of his suggestions. However, Tsubaki could see Shikamaru already sighing tiredly while Tenten just nodded. Good, at least there was no complaining from the two, though she was sure that the Nara was just holding it in. That was also good. The teacher's word was the law for this team. Insubordination couldn't be tolerated. Any more questions? Tsubaki asked with a certain amount of patience that was quickly running thin. Shikamaru and Tenten glanced to each other before they shook their heads. Tsubaki nodded with them and proceeded to take them to the cottage without any more distractions. Upon reaching the cottage, Shikamaru and Tenten noticed that was it. Nice. It wasn't the worst place they had ever seen, but it wasn't the best either. Still, they wouldn't complain, though the ideas of not going home to their parents instilled a certain amount of fear in their hearts. I would ask if you had any reservations and if you wanted to leave, but I don't care about that. This is your new life. Deal with it, Tsubaki said, making Tenten and Shikamaru wince. It wasn't even long before Tsubaki opened the door that Shikamaru and Tenten had to take a frightened step back as they noticed Naruto, the blonde murderer from 3 years ago, standing at the doorway with a wide grin on his face. Shikamaru felt a bead of sweat fall from his face. Right now, he was regretting his curiosity. Naruto took a step forward and then another step. Tsubaki took a small glare at Naruto, but didn't move to stop him. Before long, Naruto stood before Tenten and Shikamaru, who found the will to even try to move fleeting until it was gone. Bunny-chan, Pine-chan, you really came. I'm so happy, Naruto said as he held out his hands and wrapped the two in a hug. Shikamaru widened his eyes while Tenten looked at the boy who was only a year younger than her. What was this guy's malfunction? What was wrong with him? Tenten couldn't even move her body to make the kid let her go, let alone tell him to move. Shikamaru was most likely in the same boat. Seeing their predicament, Tsubaki gently patted Naruto's shoulders. Naruto-kun, you promised to behave. Hokage-sama fulfilled your request. They will be living with us today. They will also be your new teammates, Tsubaki said. Naruto turned to her with hard, dilated eyes. Mates. 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 Apes. They are apes. Naruto asked with a loud laugh as he fell on his back and laughed. Shikamaru and Tenten looked down at him in surprise while Tsubaki closed her eyes. She could already feel the small headache beginning to form from Naruto. This guy had to have a few screws loose. Shikamaru widened his eyes and glared down at Naruto. However, he didn't get the chance to say anything as Tsubaki slowly picked up Naruto and dusted him off. Hi, they are your apes, Naruto-kun. Why don't you go back to your room and watch TV while I hope your apes get settled in, Tsubaki said while Naruto nodded happily as he went back into the door. Bye-bye Bunny-chan, Pine-chan, Naruto said as quickly began to try to go up the stairs before Tenten caught herself and spoke. Hey, wait a minute. Why do you keep calling us Bunny and Pine? Tenten asked like it was something to be insulted over. Tsubaki gave a look to Tenten before turning back to Naruto to see him look at her. His eyes focus on her dangerously, like the eyes of a snake seeking to devour a mouse and strangle it with its long, poisonous fangs. He pointed forward. Bunny-chan's hair looks like warm, sticky buns from a place handler Onichan took me to. Therefore Bun's hair is Bunny-chan. Pine-chan's hair looks like a pineapple, therefore he is Pine-chan. Bunny-chan and Pine-chan. Ka-chan. They are Bunny-chan and Pine-chan. Naruto said as he ran up the stairs laughing. Tsubaki frowned. That was also something that they had failed to get rid of. No matter what, either this person known as Ka-chan was being quiet the past 3 years or nothing had happened with Naruto. Tsubaki hadn't met that woman from 3 years ago at all in the 3 years, and no reports from patrols or investigative teams in Konoha said anything about like the woman that Tsubaki mentioned. Tsubaki knew she wasn't insane. There had to be someone named Ka-chan in the village. Well, whoever she was, she wouldn't know that Naruto was stationed here. As Naruto's form slowly disappeared, Shikamaru and Tenten stood at the door. Shikamaru took a deep breath. Tsubaki-sensei, is he? Shikamaru prolonged, sending the question that Tsubaki knew the two of them were asking. Tsubaki closed her eyes and nodded, sending massive shivers down Tenten and Shikamaru's spine. That clenched it. It now all made sense. His constant bicker, the Jonin who came to pick him up, and why he was stationed so far from the rest of the class despite being in the same room. Never would Shikamaru or Tenten have guessed it. Their teammate was completely, utterly, and unequivocally insane. He is actually from the Konoha ward. He is its worst case. However, for reasons that I will not disclose to either of you at this time, he is greatly needed by this village and he wants you to for whatever reason. I will protect you both, but whether you can keep him calm is up to you. Now then, step inside. This is your life now, Tsubaki said to Tenten and Shikamaru. The bun-haired girl swallowed the lump in her throat and walked forward. Shikamaru looked at the ominous darkness and sighed before he walked inside. Troublesome.